All right, here we go. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the November meeting of the Rehoboth Beach Board of Adjustment. Start with a roll call. To my left,
William Pearlstein.
Jan Conacy.
Barry Brandt.
Fred Townsend, Board Attorney.
Edie Heron.
Mark Saunders.
The board and our legal representation are all here today. And we'll start off with the meeting. Was it properly posted, public notices issued?
Yes, it was.
Okay. I see that we did receive correspondence. We have a number of emails, and that there were also two late pieces of correspondence that came in. One we received by email that we have a copy of, and another one I was just handed to a short while ago. One of the things is, especially with the second one, it's a number of pages, 4 or 5 pages. It's really hard for the board and representation to be able to review this. I'm going to ask the people, Matt, I don't know if you had a chance to read it, and Mr. Schulman, if you're reading it now, okay. It's just, it's very difficult for the board to operate when that happens. Do we have any minutes? I don't think we have any minutes to review. And any notices, Fred, do we have?
You're owed notices, but they're being finalized, and we've got a little process, and I have not engaged my assistant on that yet, but you're going to see them electronically circulated this week.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and we have no old business to go over, so we're going to move right into the new business. This afternoon, the board has 2 cases on the calendar. Both cases deal with an area. I'm sorry, this mic seems to be a little acting up. Both cases deal with area and not use. Both of them involve property setbacks, one for a side yard setback and the other for a rear yard setback. The board will apply the appropriate quick check factors that Delaware law recognizes as guidance for boards of adjustments. Before we get started today, I just want to make a kind of an announcement on the record for the public here and also for people that will be watching. From time to time, members of the board, and as you can see with Matt, will use electronic devices. I want to assure everyone that the members of the board, and Matt, we are only using it to look at blueprints and diagrams. It's very, very hard, even when we have printed copies, that we're not unfolding huge copies to look at this. So assure everyone that that's all the board is looking at. We're not doing any kind of communications with any kind of devices. So let's move to case number 1. It is 149 Unit B, Henlopen Avenue. The board will apply this, and you may, way ahead of me. Good. No, come on up.
No, you're fine.
Great. I was going to say you can approach. The board will apply the same quick check factors that Delaware law recognizes as guidance. Under Delaware law, an applicant for an area variance must prove that the requirements create an exceptional practical difficulty. To determine whether an exceptional practical difficulty exists, the board must weigh the following 4 factors. Number 1, the nature of the zone where the property lies. Number 2, the character and use of the immediate vicinity. Number 3, whether the removal of the restrictions on the applicant's property would seriously affect neighboring properties and their uses. And finally, number 4, whether failure to remove the restriction would create an exceptional practical difficulty for the owner in relation to the owner's efforts to make normal improvements to the property. This standard is satisfied only when the difficulties alleged by the owner are practical rather than theoretical and exceptional rather than routine. Everyone that chooses to speak today will be required to give their testimony under oath. I will ask our attorney, Mr. Townsend, to administer the oaths. We do not have a court reporter today, and if we need a transcript in the future, Ann will have to work from the recording. So please, everyone, speak into the microphone. And if anyone's having difficulty, we just simply raise our hand or stop and, say, please speak and repeat it and speak into the microphone. And today for 149 Henlopen, is anyone in the audience here today to speak to that? Just raise your hand. Okay, thank you. You will have time before the board deliberates to make, to be heard. And were all notifications to the properties surrounding the applicants sent out? Okay, we're good? Okay. Go ahead, Jan.
I want, I know that one of the people, so
Okay, so yeah, we'll go to that right before we get started. Finally, after the applicants, finish speaking, we will close out the public portion. The board will then deliberate. We may ask questions, and then we'll move to a vote. So go ahead, Jan. I'll turn it over to you to make a comment.
Yes, I know Mr. Shulman. I served with him on the Planning Commission here in Rehoboth for a number of years. That will not affect my judgment in this case.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so for Henlopen Avenue, we have a request for variance for rear yard setbacks, encroachment of 8 feet into the rear yard setback. I'm going to let Matt go over the actual details of that. So at first, we will ask for Matt to give the presentation from the city.
Thank you, Chair. As a reminder, as Mr. Brandt did, I'd just like to remind everybody that my reports do not support or go against the applicant's wishes. It's just a report to what the applicant is wishing and how it affects our code. I've fielded a couple phone calls since this submission was in, and I'd just like the general public to know that this report is neither in favor nor denial of the applicant's request.
Thank you.
And thank you, and happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Before you today is case number 1023-09. Location is 149B Henlopen Avenue. Applicant today is Harvey Shulman of 2947 Albemarle Street Northwest, Washington, D.C. 20008. The owner is the same. The applicant seeks relief from the following: 270-25 rear yards. Nature of request is as follows. The applicant is seeking a variance to 270-25 rear yards to allow the construction of a new screen porch over an existing previously approved deck. The screen porch construction will not create any additional lot coverage. The property is located at 149B Henlopen Avenue, Rehoboth Beach, Delaware 19971, and is situated in the R2 General Residential District. The property is listed in Sussex County records as I'd like to clarify that it is an R1 residential district. The property is listed in Sussex County records as tax map 334-1316-39.00. The property is a rectangular shaped parcel, and the submitted survey included with the application shows the property to contain 5,000 square feet. Background information. As existing, the property contains two single-family dwelling units that are legally non-conforming. 149A Henlopen Avenue is currently undergoing renovations and is replacing a previously approved and constructed deck. The deck shall be the same square foot and lot coverage as existed. The applicant desires to construct a 7'6" by 13-foot screen porch over an existing deck totaling 97.5 square feet. Floor area ratio will increase but will remain below the allowable limits for the properties, for both properties involved. The variances requested, or variance in this case requested, is as follows. The applicant is seeking the relief from the following code provisions: 270-25 rear yards. A rear yard shall be provided on every lot, the minimum depth of which shall be as prescribed in the following table. For brevity, I removed all of the non-issues. Again, it is a R1, and it is a 15-yard setback requirement for the rear yard. The proposed addition of a screen porch would add vertical structure covering a portion of an existing deck at the rear of the property. This addition would cause additional encroachment of structure into the rear yard setback and therefore requires a variance. The proposed addition of a screen porch structure is an increase in height of an existing encroachment. For the permit to construct the porch to be issued, the request requires a variance to the reference section. Thank you.
Thank you. I was going to open it up for the board to ask questions to Matt, because I know you have a lot of material that you want to cover. So, Mr. Shulman, we're going to ask our questions to the building inspector at this point, okay?
Matt, when did this get changed from R2 to R1? Because my understanding is that end of Henlopen was pretty much an R2 district.
Let me take a look and verify on my zoning map, but our zoning,
That's one of my questions too,
Yeah,
Jan.
because my understanding was, you know, the west end of Henlopen, most of that was R2 on the side that backed up to the cemetery or former cemetery.
I was correct. Yes.
It got
It
changed?
is an R2. You're correct.
Okay, because you have,
Yes.
you have R2
You have
in the
R2,
report that
yeah.
we have.
You are correct, and that's what I thought as well. There was some confusion back and forth initially for R1, but yes, I will retract that, and it is an R2. Thank you.
Okay, not a problem. I'm reading it from your report.
Other questions, Jan?
No, that
Okay.
was it.
Bill, did you have a question?
Yes, that was one of them. Second, in the letter we got today from the neighbors, there was a discussion about whether the addition of the 2-foot steps was an increased coverage or not. Can you address whether the existing porch has got steps that these would just simply be replacing, or is there increased coverage as a result of the steps?
Thank you. So the coverage would be would need to be included in the additional coverage for the lot. If they are newly constructed and do not go over the portion that is already constructed for the decks, it would be additional lot coverage.
Okay, and do you happen to know whether there are, from your report, whether the steps already exist? Otherwise, we can ask Mr. Shulman.
I do not know. From what what has been submitted to me, it looks as if the stairs would go over a portion of deck that already exists
Okay,
and
I'll
would be
I'll
already.
ask him. Fine, thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I had.
Okay. Edie, did you have any questions?
Yes, of course I do. Matt, a couple things. I assume you wrote the building inspector report.
Yes, ma'am.
Usually or previously, I always thought you signed them. Maybe that's my misnomer, but this one isn't signed, nor is the one for the other case for today, and it's okay. Do we always presume you write them unless you tell us differently? I'm just making sure.
That is an excellent presumption. Mine does show that I have it signed, so perhaps the copy that didn't get embedded maybe did not have my signature.
Is that the initial at the top?
It is, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
okay.
right there.
I was looking for a signature at the bottom of the second page.
Gotcha.
That was
Yeah,
my error.
Because there's no real signature block, and of course, I can add one if the board so does prefer.
And you had. Got it,
Right.
okay. I'll look for the initial another time. Next question for you, I do have several for you, Matt. Why, I noticed that this one says revised in red. Why was it revised and what was revised, please?
I believe it was revised due to comments from our solicitor.
Okay, so,
So on review, the comments that he had offered were revised.
I see.
And so because the original report was embedded prior to that revision,
Right,
that's why I note on there that it's revised so that we make sure that we're looking at the correct copy.
but there was no need for us as a board to compare the two. We just used this at face value, is that correct?
Correct. And again, because the original one was already embedded onto the documents, I wanted to be sure that we
Right.
knew which one was the correct one.
Great. I have a few more questions. The statement under nature of the request, the second sentence, the screen porch construction will not create any additional lot coverage. I think that hung on to what Bill just asked, but the deck as it exists and the new steps would not create additional lot coverage.
Correct.
Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Unless the steps aren't on the footprint of the existing deck, and I think the applicant has asked for steps as well
Yeah.
in terms of his
Two
request.
2-foot steps,
Mm-hmm.
right? Either 4 or 6
So
feet
that
wide.
would be additional coverage if it did not go over the portion of existing deck.
Do we know what the portion of the existing deck is? And I know we can ask the applicant later. I'm just asking you, Matt, if you know that.
So there was a survey submitted And what I did not receive was any submission showing what those stairs would be or where they would go.
Right,
Only that they would be maybe inclusive of the existing
Right.
coverage. So I basically went on the assumption that those stairs would cover an existing portion. Roughly calculating, if we just did simple math quickly, each tread would be 12 inches, maybe the width would be 4 feet. So we're looking at additional 8 square feet of coverage.
okay. But that's something we can focus on in the applicant's time.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to confirm that 149A, Hope Henlopen, under application background information, your second bullet there, is just creating a deck, not a porch. And they obviously didn't need a variance because we haven't seen them. Is that correct? I mean,
That is correct. So
because they're having a construction project right now, 149A, the property in front. the
Right,
house in
they
front.
are replacing a previously approved deck. There is an ADA compliant ramp that's being added to that deck. The deck is decreasing in size as originally permitted. But the ramp will add additional coverage. It looks to be a wash, but we would need a new survey, which is part of the requirement for that building permit once it finishes its construction.
Okay, so when they're getting their certificate of occupancy, is that when that would be checked or?
Yes, to close out that permit for that property, there is a requirement to to submit a survey that is signed and sealed from the surveyor to show those lot coverage
But they
numbers.
have a building permit, 149A.
They do.
149A, okay. Couple more things. With 149B, I'm presuming, since it wasn't stated, right now there are no encroachments of rear yard, side yard, there are no encroachments that structure creates on the lot.
For A.
No, for B, right now, without anything that they want to do.
For B, it would be encroachments that were already approved under permits that were previously issued prior to zoning code changes.
When the zoning was different.
Right.
Okay, I got it. Let's see. And let's see. If we approve their variance, will they be in compliance with all the other zoning requirements?
As far as the documentation that has been submitted
given.
for this applicant, for application, everything that I see is going to be compliant minus the rear yard setback encroachment.
Okay. And I saw,
So, or legal non-conforming because it right, okay.
Correct.
and let's see, we had, just one sec here. That the applicant is asking to put this is bullet 2 under application background information, a screen porch over an existing deck. Now, the existing deck is right to the back, it's straight, and then it goes around the side of the building. I didn't see and wasn't clear, they're not trying to put a porch over the whole deck, the kind of quasi wraparound. It's just the part that's facing the rear of the yard. Is that correct? The rest is just, they're asking to just redo the deck part? Are they keeping that deck? Again, we'll hear from the applicant, but I want to know
Right.
from your perspective what you think that you have been asked.
From the materials submitted, the applicant is stating a 7'6" by 13-foot deck.
Okay.
Or screen porch in this case, I apologize.
Right.
Everything looks from the documentation submitted that it's going to go over the existing portion of the deck. Granted, some of that deck may need to be reconstructed to accept new loads or different connections, but there will be no increase in deck, and only that which is 97.5, the 7'6" by 13 feet, will be allowed to be constructed through permit,
Okay.
if approved.
Okay, right. Always if approved. So we don't know, without talking to the applicant yet, what happens to the remainder of that wrap deck. We can ask him when he's testifying, but we don't know, you don't know that. Nobody
No
has
information
mentioned.
was submitted for
Okay,
that.
because it's an interesting quasi-wrap around the house. And then, let's see. That's all I have for you. I have other questions for the applicant. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Edie. Mark, do you have any questions?
I do, but I also suffer from deck step confusion, but I think I'll wait for Mr. Schulman to explain it, so.
Okay, go ahead, Fred.
Well, I can go after you or whatever. Okay. Just real quick, Mr. Janis, I don't know how long you've been with the city, but if you saw this application, it's extensive and it refers to a great deal of, I guess, controversy or whatever going back to the late 80s and 1990.
Yeah, so the documentation submitted does suggest that. I was not part of that process. You know, obviously, we were flooded with a plethora of information with this. I can only make comments to what has been provided, essentially.
Right. But did anything jump out at you from that or your knowledge of that set of circumstances that has a bearing, in your opinion, on this application?
I guess through the initial conversations with the applicant did suggest some things that were present, but not listed in a deed. And so I had no tie back to those particular things that the applicant commented on. I can only go what's in the documentation presented to me.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Fred. I do have a couple questions. Mr. Janis, the deck appears to be a few decades old.
Indeed.
Would a variance need to be, applied for if they need to replace the existing deck?
As long as the deck would stay the same size or get smaller, they would not need a variance as they were approved prior to the zoning code changes.
Okay, thank you. Just a curiosity question. So 149B receives the rear yard setback because, of course, they're not, so the front 149A gets the front yard. Okay, it's just a first time I'm seeing one of these dual houses on a lot, just curiosity. Also, in your report, under the variance requested section, how does a smaller porch structure create additional encroachment of structure onto an existing deck that is larger? Is it meant to mean, I'm going to maybe answer my own question, is it meant to mean that the additional structure is an encroachment in height, not in horizontal?
That's correct. It's a
Okay.
vertical encroachment
Okay.
increase. That's right.
Okay, thank you. Again, if the deck had to be replaced, the applicant would be permitted to put the supporting structures underneath for safety, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right, that's all the questions I had for you, Matt.
Thank you.
Any final questions for Matt?
I'm good.
Okay. Let's go over to Mr. Schulman, and Mr. Townsend will swear you in.
Mr. Schulman, at this point, we'll ask you to introduce yourself. I presume that's who you are, and give us your address, and then I will administer the oath, and then you can begin your presentation.
Thank you. I'm Harvey Schulman, the owner of 149B Henlopen Avenue, and I submitted the variance application, and I'm ready to take the oath.
Right, so your address is as listed on the application, 2947 Albemarle is,
In DC, in
DC.
Northwest is where I'm,
and
5
you're-
or 6 months
And you're the
later.
owner of this property, obviously.
yes,
Yep, okay. So, Mr. Schulman, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, you can proceed.
Okay,
Before you begin, Mr. Chairman, Fred, I want to follow up on the question that was asked a second ago. We've got 50, 60 pages of documents about things that happened 30 years ago. Can you, from a legal perspective, address how much, if anything, that is relevant to the quick check factors? I'd like to avoid spending an enormous amount of time on them if they are simply not relevant. And just on Matt's point, something that's not in the deed is very interesting, but it's not in the deed. And so I'd like to try to avoid us spending a lot of time on the history, except to the extent it's relevant. Mr. Chairman?
I'm going to probably spend 2 minutes on it here.
Good, I've now used up half your time. You and I are used to that, that's okay.
Okay, thank you. Let me start by saying that I tend to over-prepare and be too thorough. And when I met with Matt some months ago to talk about this permit and try to explain, and he asked why and a bunch of questions, and I told him a lot. And he said, just make sure you document everything. And I guess I took it too literally. But, you know, you have the basically, I think, everything I could find. What I didn't give you, I tend to apply for a permit for almost everything. I mean, I have permits for re-roofing, moving a shed, gutters.
Sir, I don't think you're speaking into the microphone.
Oh,
Turn
I'm
away.
sorry.
Wait, and Ann is going to have to deal
Okay.
with the recording later.
Is this better?
Better.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Much better.
So I just have a lot of material, and I guess in to be cautious, and you never know what's going to happen, you know, you put stuff in, but I didn't try to put in the kitchen sink either. But I apologize for the long filing. If I can first go to a couple of the questions that you all asked, which maybe we'll cut to the chase on some of the confusion before I make my general remarks. There is an existing deck there, and it does wrap around the house. And one thing that's part of everything that goes on there is you can't have two separate single-family homes on one lot anymore. The city changed that just a few years ago. And even before then, everything we had to do basically had to deal with the footprint that was around. So you see a lot of shapes and sizes and wonder why, and that's because a lot of it, that's where particularly the house was when I bought it. There's not much you can do about that. The reason for the weird shapes and things is honestly to protect trees that were there. It would have been a lot better to just have a deck that goes straight along the side, but there were, some of them are still there, but it's been 40 years since I bought the house. Bob Hughes came and looked at one of them and said, you better get rid of this or it's going to be on your house. But those cutouts and things like that were really intended to protect trees that were there. And some are still there and some are not. The deck does wrap around the house, but a very important question that some of you asked, the rear portion of the deck, just the part behind the house, nothing on the side, is about 330 square feet. About, I think, 16 by 15 or something is pretty much rectangular, and then there's another portion that adds the remaining. But it's a 330-foot square deck. I'm asking to put an enclosed porch over 97.5 feet of it. I'm not coming in here saying I want my whole deck covered, half of my deck covered. My contractor has said that this is probably the smallest screen porch he's ever built, other than someone who just wanted a screened passageway or walkway to get in their house, and really suggested that I ask for something more than that. And maybe in retrospect, I should have, but I think I can get away enjoying the backyard and doing the things that a lot of other people do with a 7.5 by 13 square foot, 97.5 square foot screen porch. I'm not looking to enclose the porch. I will never enclose the porch. I have no interest in enclosing the porch. I just want to be able to be outside in my yard. Another question someone asked is, will the steps be over the existing deck? Absolutely. Right now, there's a sort of a high part of the deck, and you step down to the lower part of the deck. And so the porch is going to be there, and you will still need to step down to the lower part of the deck. You can look at it as the existing steps are being moved, or they're being torn down and new steps, but the point is the steps were part of the variance application, and they are specifically over the existing deck that's there. There's zero additional lot coverage. The other thing I wanted to say is Matt mentioned about what's happening in the front house. And while I can't take responsibility of the front house because I don't own it, we try to coordinate things. And one of the things that she has done in taking down her old deck is she has reduced, and you can see this on the survey. There was a problem here. I submitted originally a survey that nothing had changed in really 20 years as far as anything being moved. And I agreed to get an up-to-date survey done. The problem is the front house was a moving target. Every week, something was taken off the ground, put on the ground, whatever. Fortunately, her new deck was installed by November 12th, and on November 12th, Simpler went out and took a new survey. And you have the new survey, which I submitted a couple of weeks ago as soon as, yes, thank you. And you'll see, and if you compare the old survey that I submitted from 2002 and the new survey, basically the only thing that's different in terms of any lot coverage or natural area is that the new deck in the front house is smaller. It does have a ramp. The original deck only had steps, but the ramp does not make up for the reduction, doesn't overcome the reduction in deck size. So, you know, I didn't want to get too granular here, but I believe that if you approve this screen porch over the existing deck in the back, that when you consider both houses together and what it is, you're actually going to find less lot coverage, about 100 feet less lot coverage than there was over the last 20-something years. And you're going to find more natural area because by taking her deck, and we agreed there will be plantings along her deck, there'll be more natural area. So there is absolutely no addition in lot coverage, no reduction in natural area, quite the opposite. The only thing that's increasing is 97.5 feet of FAR to go over the existing deck. I think, so I'm going to, as I promised Mr. Pearlstein, 2 minutes on the history. And it is relevant in the sense of what happened with that weird 3 feet along the back. And you know, if you want to see the 1872 map of the city, I can show it to you. But basically, the church and the cemetery claimed 3 more feet than were on the 1872 map. And the big dispute was who had the 3.2 feet. And to make everything happen, and you saw all the everythings, the church getting its money, saving all the trees, there was no tree ordinance, there was no site plan review. Mr. Rago and I agreed with the arm twisting of the then city solicitor to quit claim that 3.2 feet to the church and to the St. Michael's lots, so their lots could be the right size. Without those 3.2 feet, the significance is that 4 of their 8 lots would have been less than 5,000 square feet. So maybe we were stupid, you know, but we tried to do a good deed 40 years ago or 30 years ago.
Quick question, when you are you using as a synonym the 3-foot and the no man's land? I saw no man's land over and over, and then I saw 3-foot. Those are synonyms, is that correct?
Yes, they are, thank you.
Thank you.
Sometimes it's called a buffer.
Yeah, right, okay, thank you.
So I think the end result of the history, Mr. Pearlstein, is that after a lot went on, if you were to come to my backyard and look at it, and you were to say, oh, well, Harvey obviously owns up to the fence, and there's actually 2 fences. The neighbor behind me put up a fence, and I have a fence. So it's a double fence. And you'd say, well, yeah, that's in his backyard. And for all intents and purposes, it is, and the easement recorded in Georgetown. It's just that legally, we don't own the title to that property. And the relevance of that is that visually, when what you look at there, And when you see where the screen porch is in regard to the fence, it's really not going to look like there's an 8-foot encroachment. It's going to look like there's a 5-foot encroachment. If you went out, with the surveyor and marked the ground, it would look like 8 feet to the property line. But,
Because of the steps, is that right?
pardon me?
No,
No,
No.
because of the existing deck.
No,
because of
it's,
the 3-foot place.
The buffer being
Right.
The 3-foot buffer, no man's land thing.
yeah, and, may I, this is sort of in there, but I did make enough copies for, this really shows, it's an excerpt from what's submitted, if I can hand it to you, and there are enough copies. You'll see on this,
Ann needs to have one. She has to have
yeah, I
some of
believe I made an extra.
everything that we,
We can share one.
yeah, Mark and I can share. Make sure Ann gets one.
But you'll see on that what the situation is. It shows where the fences are. It shows where the no man's land, the buffer zone, the easement is. It shows where the legal property line is. But it's just a weird situation that grew out of us allowing the church to get on with its business. And that's really, and it goes to the situation with the lot, in particular, whether there's special conditions or an exceptional situation. This is not, that's one of the reasons why this is not your typical lot. Now, let me move on and say that, you do have the survey, the updated survey just as a couple of weeks ago, which is, in my view, completely accurate. I've showed you now where the no man's land is. I hate to use that term because normally I would say no person's land, but that sounds really strange.
I was just trying to use specifically what the documents used.
Yeah.
There was so much to read and understand that I wanted to be sure that I was on the correct page, so to speak.
You can thank Matt for asking all that stuff.
I always thank Matt.
And so the bottom line, when you look at all of this, is that, again, no additional lot coverage, no less natural area. In fact, considering both houses, less lot coverage and more natural area. And the 97.5% additional FAR still leaves us several hundred feet below.
Well, I have a question about that. This is just a screen porch with a roof, correct? And you have no other screen porch?
No,
So Matt, wouldn't he get 250 foot for that anyhow?
it's,
That's the front porch.
it's not a front, yeah, see, we're a back house,
right, yeah.
it's a front
All
porch,
right.
or, anyway.
That makes sense.
Thank you. So I think in my written submission, you keep saying all the pages, you have the architect's site plan, his renderings, the architect's drawn elevations, actual photos. I thought lawyers are expensive, but architects are also expensive. Unless somebody has questions about what was in the submittal in terms of the elevations and the photos and the site plan and all the other stuff, which I think is pretty straightforward as to what it is. What I'd like to do is to sort of move on to what you all have talked about in terms of the quick check test and how that applies here.
Could we ask some questions first?
However, Mr.
I'm
Schulman,
happy to
if
be
he wants to finish his
interrupted, and
presentation,
hopefully I
What-
won't lose my,
what do you
it's up to
prefer?
you. Would you like to finish your presentation? And then
whatever.
we'll- and then we'll go through and
Okay.
answer our questions.
Thank you. So really, as I looked at that, there were two legal standards for the variance. The first is there has to be special conditions or an exceptional situation. And then if there is, do you meet the four-factor quick check test? So, and I think, the special conditions or exceptional situation, which I believe doesn't exist for any other properties in town. But I'm kind of cautious, so I don't know. Maybe there are 5 or 10 or something where it does. As Mr. Brandt said, he's never seen a situation like this with two single-family houses on this same lot and yada, yada, you know, and that's the way it was when we bought it. It was a condo. It was one of the first in town. The condo documents were actually drawn up by Bill Wright, who was the prior city attorney, and he did this after he went back into private practice. And so we bought the rear house. And what's unusual and exceptional and special about that lot, besides the St. Michael's thing, is that if you look at the number of R2 lots in town, and again, I've got my maps and other stuff I could bore you with if you want the backup detail, but there are a few hundred R2 lots in town. And I have driven by and looked at the tax map probably for every single one. And of those 5,000 square foot R2 lots, probably 75% of them have only one structure on them. It's typically either a single home with a couple of units or 2 or 3 units, or it's literally a single-family home, and they may have an accessory garage, or, you know, in the old days, they allowed accessory structures. But not, 75% is nothing like our situation. They're one structure and a garage type thing. Then when I looked at what's left, almost all of those, not all, were owned by the same person. So the same person owned both structures. So they had the flexibility to do whatever they wanted. You know, if they were separate structures, they were owned and controlled by the same person. You know, and that's just not the way this property has been. And then when you look at, when you get to the ones that are not owned by the same person and, you know, are separate, yada, 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 you'll see a sizable percentage of them have screened porches, but virtually all of them encroach on the side yard, a backyard. When you think about it, 2 separate buildings on the same 5,000 square foot lot, imagine, you know, how many screened porches would be in the side yard. And I considered the side yards here, it's impossible. I mean, the encroachments would have been much worse, and the additional lot coverage and whatever. So a number of those R2 lots, and again, you want to get granular, I can tell you where, are longer than 100 feet. You know, probably a good 10 or 15% are longer than 100 feet. And so when you get down to it, the R2 lots that have 2 separate single-family structures owned by different people without screened porches, there's mine, and I couldn't get in everybody's backyard, you know. I mean, I did try to look on Google Maps and every other place, but I just couldn't find it, you know. And as I said, you can't even build this thing anymore. As somebody said to me, well, it sounds like a black swan or a white peacock, you know. And I think the point is, under the variance test, it doesn't have to be unique. It just has to be special or exceptional. I think we may even be unique, but I think these lots are definitely special or exceptional situations. So I think it meets that first part, you know, is there something about the lot and the buildings on it that make it different from basically almost everything else? So then when you go to the quick check test, you know, there are 4 factors, as you mentioned, the quick check test, and I think 2 of them are pretty simple. You know, one is the nature of the zone. So we're in a residential zone, and screened porches are exceedingly common. There's nothing unusual about my house, my lot, in terms of residential zone and use and structure. And then the second factor is the character and use of the immediate vicinity. And again, you can go around as I did, and you know, most lots have screened porches. The ones that don't actually used to have screened porches and have enclosed their porches, either completely enclosed or they've put in, you know, huge windows that you can open up and basically have the enjoyment of a screen porch, but close your windows when you don't want it. I'm not interested in any of that. I just want a regular old screen porch. And so so the third factor is a serious effect on the neighbors. And of course, anything that anybody does is going to have some effect on the neighbors. You know, I don't like that. I did read my neighbor's letter very quickly, and I'd like to hear what they have to say because, you know, I just got this morning. And I can already see there's a number of things in there I disagree with. There's a lot of opinion, you know, like the distance, you know, it's not a healthy distance and between the structures. And actually, if you look in what I submitted and spent a lot of time doing this, that the distances, if you allow this small enclosed, unenclosed but screened porch, still from the corner of my screen porch to the nearest screen porch behind me, and I see these neighbors are here, is 18 feet. There are a lot of places in town where buildings and screen porches, especially on the side lot lines, but also rear, are closer than 18 feet. From my screen porch, and by the way, the screen porch in the house behind me, I want 7.5 by 13. Theirs is something like 20 by 18 or whatever. I mean, it's huge. But we're still 18 feet from that. And then from my screen porch to the actual house, the indoor of the house, is 30 feet. So these, in my view, these are healthy distances. And frankly, but for the change in the zoning code 6 or 7 years ago, which increased the rear yard setback, and but for this 3.2-foot no man's land, there probably wouldn't, had we not quitclaim that, there wouldn't be any need for variance. We would, whatever we want to do here would have been within our land, and again, still over the deck, no new lot coverage, et cetera. I do not see any serious negative effect on the neighbors from doing it. Yes.
Can you assure us that the use of it will just be yourself sitting out there having coffee, not a hot tub, and nothing like that?
If you want to put a condition in this, I mean, I'm not asking for it, but I'm open to it.
I'm
If you
thinking
want to
that
say, well, no,
The effect of the neighbors, which is what we're talking about, should have no effect if you're doing the same thing you always do. But if you're changing the use of that space,
nothing.
we'd like to know about it.
No hot tubs, no spas, no crazy parties, no, if you want to say it shall never be enclosed, I'm fine with that. Whatever, you know, I just want to be able to go in the backyard and enjoy a very beautiful treed setting, which unfortunately has the problems that it has. So I don't see a serious effect. I'll wait to hear what the neighbor says in terms of the neighbor's, not opinion, but facts, because I've given you facts about distances and this and that, and I can say I don't like something, I don't want to look at it or whatever, but, you know, and that's not irrelevant, but I asked you to weigh it against the facts I presented. So now I want to end up with the fourth factor in the quick check test about the exceptional practical difficulty. And again, that's really asked two things. The first is what we're doing a normal improvement? You know, it's an exceptional practical difficulty in making a normal improvement. So someone would say if they were building a swimming pool or whatever, you know, they were having exceptional practical difficulty, but they're not making a normal improvement. I will probably have one of the smallest screen porches around. It's incredibly normal. And why do people have them? I won't go into length of this, but it's not in detail in my written filing, believe it or not, so I'll make a few points. But you want to be able to enjoy your yard without being bitten by mosquitoes, wasps, ticks, and other things. You want to be able to have a meal or a sandwich out there with all the bugs and everything else coming to what you're eating. The CDP for Rehoboth specifically says, one of the concerns in the city is, it says, quote, "Residents are dealing with more ticks and mosquitoes. Of particular concern are vulnerable populations and vector-borne illnesses." That's in page 7-14 of the CDP. And DENREC, I actually called DENREC about all this. How do you, and DENREC's advice, and it's on their website. I won't give you the website address because hopefully, if you want it, you'll ask for the record. But DENREC has a thing, how to avoid mosquito bites. The number one thing on how to avoid mosquito bites is, quote, "Stay inside at dawn, dusk, and at night." Why have a backyard? Now, there's this question of spraying came up, and I quickly saw my neighbor's letter that they spray. And apparently what I found out is that many of the neighbors there spray. And that's why they said to me, yes, the reason you're having all these things in your yard is because we spray. And so they're going to the place that's not sprayed. But even them, and I think a couple of my neighbors wrote, David Simmons on St. Michael's Place, even with spraying, it doesn't solve the problem. You could be outside for a few minutes and if it's sprayed, not get bit, but try to eat or do anything outside. So we want to be able to enjoy our yard the way people commonly enjoy their yard. And I believe, and I am not interested in pesticides. I went through the DENREC site, I talked to them. DENREC actually says they cannot recommend for or against pesticides. The judgment is out on whether they help or not. They do kill other insects, which are good insects. So I think where we're left is, this is a normal thing that people have for these reasons. And is there an exceptional practical difficulty in building this porch? Well, there's two things here. There's the porch location and the size, okay? There's no other place to build a porch, even this small, around the house without getting into side yard setbacks or other things like that. I mean, this is it. And if you have questions about that, I can explain more about, the foundation and keeping the structure of the house because it's grandfathered, et cetera. The second thing about the exceptional practical difficulty is the porch size, 7.5 times 13 feet. And I don't think, there's no place to even put a porch that size. And in creating a porch that size, we try to look at what is the smallest that could be and have it functional. And I've talked to the architect, the builder, and a number of other people. And anything less deep than 7.5 feet just doesn't work. And what I would like to do, again, the second thing, I believe I have enough copies of this. I made comments about the wheelchair access. I took that page, if I may, and this is the ADA, and basically what it says is the minimum recommended is 78 inches width. That people in a wheelchair, some people can maneuver in 60 or 68 inches, but they actually say on their website, a large percentage of people have huge difficulty. So they recommended, just for wheelchair access, 78 inches. This is not a personal thing for me right now in terms of myself. Hopefully in the future it won't be. But for those of you who have family members or friends who wheelchairs, I have to tell you, it just opens up a new view on the world. You don't look at something and say, oh, well, I can get away with this. You think about, well, what about my brother or my parents when they were alive or whatever, And so maybe I made a mistake in saying 7.5 feet, but that's the application. You can't grant more than that. I'm not going to come back with more. I think the 7.5 feet, which is 90 inches, which is 12 inches more than the recommended 78 inches, is enough space for someone to help someone someone in a wheelchair. And believe me, we've had people in Rehoboth, maybe some of you know, who visit us in our house and just maneuvering around the dining room table and other stuff. In this porch, there's probably going to be room for 4 people to sit around the table. And if one of them's a wheelchair and it's less than its depth, it's not going to work. So I think there is an exceptional practical difficulty in the sense of there's no place else around my house to put a porch that's this small to meet these needs. And I will note in the end that this 8-foot variance, or 8-foot encroachment, there are Board of Adjustment decisions. I know you all say, you know, nothing's really precedent, everything's its own facts. It's kind of like the IRS, you know, every case is different. But, no, but I mean, you know, you try to tell, well, your case is, you know, different than somebody else's case. But the fact is, you have found.
But don't take offense at that, is what you're
No,
saying.
no, no, I'm not saying you're like the IRS. I'm saying the lack of precedent, but
Okay.
bad humor maybe.
Okay.
The 7.5 feet, I'm still not clear whether that includes the steps or doesn't include the steps.
No, it specifically says that does not include.
not.
So the new encroachment, if you will, the encroachment improvement, it's more than 7.5 feet.
Wait a minute,
No,
Mark.
it's,
not, because it's going to be where the deck is.
the deck is there
The
now.
deck is already there.
Deck's under the whole thing, right?
No, it's not under the whole thing.
No, 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 no,
Okay.
yeah, no,
right.
it's not a new
That doesn't make-
encroachment, it's,
So,
Mr. Shum,
so one at a time, though.
yeah, is that the end of your presentation?
pardon me?
Is that the end of your
Yeah,
presentation?
I just want to
Okay.
say, 8 feet in sounds like a lot, but you yourself in other cases, and courts in Delaware have said 8 feet, and they even use the word as minimal in the big picture. So, thank you, and I think, only spend 2 minutes on
Thank-
St. Michael's Place.
Thank you very much. I'm going to, Mark, I'm going to start with a question. When, Mr. Shulman, when was the house built?
Ooh, the original house has been there since the 50s or 60s. I don't know. I mean, there have been improvements over the
Okay.
years, but
Was the porch there when you purchased the house?
Do you mean the deck?
porch.
The deck? Thank you, thank you.
No, part of a deck was there, but no. I put in the deck in '86, and I got a building permit. And in fact, the city inspector came out
Okay.
and looked at the deck, and
Did you need a variance for that?
no, I did not.
Okay, good, all right, thank you. And you are not, the deck looks old, you are not intending to replace the deck, right? Even no matter.
Absolutely not.
Okay,
Are you replacing any of the deck, the wraparound portion?
I mean, if a board is rotting, you know, I take up the board and put in a new board, but am I replacing the deck or any significant part of the deck? Absolutely not.
okay. Next question, not that I can make recommendations, but can you or would you reduce the deck size to match the size of the rear, if the porch was approved, to reduce the size of the deck so that just the porch and the steps would remain?
Well, I couldn't do that because then I would be walking from the porch into a muddy mess, and I would have to, I think the quick
So you
answer
couldn't
is
do-
no,
you-
it's just not practical.
Okay. A question on that no man's land. When you purchased the house, did the deed say that you owned no man's land or that you did not own no man's land?
You know, it's a good question because it gave me the lot, right? And,
But you had to have a survey.
yeah, well,
Not
for,
necessarily.
see, for decades, homes in Rehoboth were just conveyed by lot, okay? And so, if you want me to get this out, I will.
No, just-
But this was a lot on the original Methodist Church survey from 1873.
Right.
And so was the cemetery lot. And it turned out that what was really on the ground was not what was on the cemetery.
It's
Was not
actually-
on the 18th. This is why it took the city commissioners and the planning commission many months to deal with it.
Okay.
It's actually more likely that the property was conveyed to more than one person in separate deeds than it
okay.
is that it wasn't conveyed to either.
So they both could lay
There
claim.
are instances in which legal descriptions conflict with one another, and the same land is purportedly owned by adjacent landowners.
Okay, so when you wrote that quit statement, you know, in that original, because when I was reading all your submittals, I had to laugh because I create a computer programmer, so when you're like, the way we would write programs, if you know this, then jump here, then jump there. I read right through that. So you feel that you gave up that land?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's what I wanted to get, okay.
Not only feel, but let me just make this point. The developer, the owner of that land, the church, had sold to the owner or the builder of the Boardwalk Hotel and a bunch of other properties. So I was not dealing with some rube on the other side. When there's a reason they asked us to quit claim the land to them.
Okay.
And so, yes, absolutely, we owned it.
And I found it very interesting in your documentation that you said you gave up that land, and then there was some other land that you were talking about in the forest, and then you made statements that you took ownership because you inhabited, because you felt it was abandoned.
No,
That was
but that's
very,
not-
very strange to me, reading that.
Yeah, well, so my neighbor, Mr. Rago, who's a lawyer, tried to educate me on that part of the law in Delaware, but I'm not, I put it in because it's historical fact,
Okay,
but what is clear is that the 3.2 feet is or they wanted to reduce it to 3 feet. 3 feet, we had to quit claim
okay.
to the church and the developer.
Because by reading all of that, it felt like, geez, you had picnic benches in the forest and you were laying claim to, and I was just like, whoa, okay. And then finally, just a commentary. Every case to the Board of Adjustment stands on its own merits. You made statements of, well, this case and this case and this case and this case. Just from your understanding of me, your case stands on its own merits, and I would hope the board does the same thing. We don't look at other cases to compare, if Johnny got this and Susie got that. No, all your evidence, it stands on its own. I think the board would agree with me.
Yeah, we don't operate
don't.
on precedents.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that is it. Thank you. Okay, next.
I have questions, but if someone else needs to go, okay, I'll go ahead. Mr. Schulman, just so I'm sure here, I looked at your property. So the back deck is what you're talking about with the porch that has the standards in it already. And then the part that goes on the corner and then down the side of the house, on the west side of the house, is going to remain unchanged? Unless you have a board or something.
Everything about any part of that deck is going to remain unchanged, with the exception of where this screen porch would be. It would be
Overwrites a
put
certain part of the
over
deck.
that part of
Yes.
the deck.
I get it. And I have a question for Matt before I have more questions for you. Matt, back to R1, R2, is there any difference at all in R1, R2? I know the side yards or the backyards, it's 15 feet for R1 and R2. But so we're not dealing with that. But is there anything else about the difference between R1 and R2 that we need to be aware of as we're looking at this? Is there anything else that could affect our judgment here today?
There's a front porch rule that's unrelated to this, but primarily the two zones are very much the same, except for the front setbacks, again, which we're not dealing with here.
Okay. Those would affect 149A, correct?
Potentially.
Potentially, if they were in dispute. Back to you, Mr. Schulman. Let's see, on page, on your letter supplement to variance application for 149B Henlopen Ave, it says received November 27th at the top, which I think it got there earlier, but it's a,
I'm sorry.
think it's-
I had yeah, what page, please?
I'm on the first page of that. In in an introduction on the first page, the paragraph that starts because, it's about 2/3 of the way down.
Yes.
Okay, the second to last line, you have total 9-foot encroachment for these steps. I thought we were talking about 10 because we've got 8 plus 2, right? I didn't understand, I'd seen 10 everywhere else, I thought, and then I came back and I saw this 9. Because you've got, am I wrong? I made a little
You
drawing
know,
of what I thought I
there's
knew.
drawings in it, and it may have been a typo, but the drawing is accurate.
Well, we're not talking about the drawing, we're talking about the
Yes,
actual
I
text.
understand what you're saying.
Okay, so you're saying this is a typo, probably?
Yeah, because
It's
it
10 feet.
says, it talks specifically about the screen porch itself, and then it says there will also be 2 48-inch wide steps down, which would encroach another 24 inches
Right.
beyond the porch.
So it's 10.
Encroach, not of what's not already an encroachment, but it would be an
Understand.
encroachment, yes.
If we look at the physical porch, it would be 8 feet of porch, one 1-foot step, and 1 1-foot step, which is 2 feet plus 8, which is 10.
Actually, I wish it was 8 feet of porch, but it would be
was
7.5
7.5.
feet
Well,
of porch,
yeah,
plus
okay.
the 2 steps,
Right,
yes.
but, yes, okay. So that's a typo.
And where will the steps be located then?
They would be located. they're
7.5
actually
foot
shown
side or
on
the
figure-
13 foot
Figure
side?
1, on that letter on page 2, it shows the steps. You can see the kind of honeycombed white area from the porch,
We need tabs
and
for
then you
this
see the
application.
steps coming down.
This may show.
Is that it? Okay.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I felt that was
You're welcome.
probably just a typo. I do have a couple more, and then my learned colleagues, I'm sure will have some other questions for you. Let's see. On your page number 5 of that same letter,
Okay?
okay? There in the paragraph that begins although, halfway down the page.
Yes.
The third line of that says number of proposed lots to less than 1 lot, L lot. It doesn't even say anything.
I'm sorry, although,
And then look at the third line, number of proposed lots to less than,
oh, yeah,
it's like 1 lot, or is that an L lot, or what? I don't know what's supposed to go there, sir.
wow, I wish you had read this before I submitted, because I thought
I read it
proofread
4 times, so maybe more.
Yeah, it should be, St. Michael's Place would not agree to reduce the number of proposed lots to less than, it should be 8 lots.
8 lots.
Yeah,
okay.
because that's what they wanted, 8 lots.
Right,
And
that-
without that 3 foot, they only would have been able to have
Okay.
4 lots.
Thank you for the clarification. Then-
Thank you.
Then if we go to, just a minute here. I have to match up your page number with the page number of Ann's wonderful, I don't know how she does it. She gives us all of this information and makes it look easy. On your page 11,
Okay,
and 12, and 13, I think that you have a typo multiple times, as if you're talking about lot 140, it should be lot 149, not 147. If you go to page 11, and halfway down, there's a paragraph that begins prior.
page 11, halfway down.
The paragraph that begins prior. Okay, then go down to line 5. You're talking about,
Yes,
your
you're
property is 149, right, sir?
Absolutely right.
Okay, well, 147 is listed there.
Yep.
It's listed 3 times on page 12, and it's listed like that, and it's listed once on page 13.
Yes, thank you. Wow.
But we're in agreement, it's 149.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. But we're all in agreement that it should have been 149. That's what I want to make sure that we.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, I don't
I'm-
own 147.
I'm not trying to
yeah.
be
No,
an editor here. I'm just trying to make sure that we're presented with exactly what you want us to be
yes,
presented with.
thank you.
Okay, and that's all that I have. I do thank you for the thoroughness of your presentation, and as a tree person in Rehoboth, I'm very grateful for your saving every tree you can save, but that's not affecting my judgment here today at all on your matter. I'm just letting you know that I thank you for your interest in the trees.
Well, thank you, and just as an aside, as I say, there was no tree ordinance in 1990 when this happened. There was no site plan ordinance.
Thank you. Mark, I'll go over to you for,
Speaking of trees, in the one neighbor that had objected had sent us a picture from 6 Michael's Place to the porch, pointing out that there's no barrier of view between her house and your new porch. And I'm wondering, is there space here to plant a tree? Keep peace in the neighborhood, so to speak?
Well, one, there are trees, but I noticed those pictures
picture,
were
right.
those
Right.
pictures were taken, you have to see the angles. So in the summer, which is basically when this porch is going to be used, the summer months, there are 3 trees in that area. And while the first 6 feet or so don't have leaves on them anymore, above that, there are branches and trees, and they shed their leaves in the winter. So these pictures are a little bit misleading because it seems to be taken when the leaves are down. Number 2, if you want me to plant some other trees there, I will. But number 3, and I really didn't want to get into this, but maybe my neighbor's letter leaves me no choice but to get into it.
Well, my question was only about one tree.
Yeah, but-
Could you not put one tree there?
No, well, yeah, well, what I want to say is there used to be a tree in part of that area.
Okay.
Okay, and may I pass this out?
Is it relevant to
Yeah, it's totally
the
relevant.
one tree that we're asking about?
Totally relevant to your.
All right.
I will plant whatever you want, and I'll get another one.
Make sure, yeah.
We can't hear anything that you're saying while you're out on your feet. I don't,
But you'll notice on what I pointed out, at the top, this was part of the tree easement. This is part of the tree easement that was recorded in Georgetown. And it showed very specific trees that were not to be removed by the owners of St. Michael's Place, okay? One of those trees was a small pine tree, and you'll see the picture at the top of the page. Then what you'll see in the middle of the page is when the owner behind me did a whole bunch of work on her house in 2015, you'll actually see it shows that tree is still there. Of course, it's bigger because it's years later. But then what you'll see at the bottom is, and I don't know when this happened, that tree was taken down. And either somebody appeared in my neighbor's yard behind her fence and took the tree down, or the neighbor took it down. I don't know, okay? But it was a violation of the tree easement. Had that tree been there, and you'll see the picture at the bottom, it would have been common to what you see at the bottom, which is in another neighbor's yard, which Mr. Rago's yard, which I know because we did this together. So your point about the trees, I absolutely agree with you that it would be better to have more screening, but I will tell you that if that tree had not been taken down in violation of the tree easement, that while the screening would not be perfect, there would be screening. And I am willing to put some kind of evergreen or other tree up there as a condition if you want that. But the taking down of that tree is something I had nothing to do with. It wasn't even in my yard, but it was in the 12-foot no molestation area that was in Georgetown filed. So it's a good point, and thank you.
I have no other question.
Hey, Jan?
Yeah, I have just a couple of things. First of all, I've been in Rehoboth a really long time, and I was totally unaware of what went on at St. Michael's Place. I remember it being built and actually walked around while it was being built. So I found that history kind of interesting. But I talked to somebody who had been involved, and one of the things that this person told me when I was kind of checking on what happened, way back then, And what they told me was, without the quitclaim deeds by Mr. Schulman and Mr. Rago, that St. Michael's, that the Epworth Church would not have been able to sell the property, and the Epworth Church was in great need of money back then to do renovations. And so I did verify that to see with somebody whose wife was actually on the board of vestry, or whatever one calls it in a Methodist church. I find the, I mean, we live on 50 by 100 lots in Rehoboth. Whether there's one house on it, 2 or 3, these are small lots. And when I sit on my front porch, which is not screened, but it's a nice size, bigger than that, and my neighbor is on hers, and my neighbor on this side is on hers, and even the neighbor over here. So from 38 to 44, we can all hear each other on our front porches. Some of them are screened. The one on one side, both sides of me are screened. Actually, they're all screened except mine, but we can all hear each other. Sometimes I can hear exactly what they're saying, and sometimes we just hear the murmur of voices while we're sitting there. It's the nature of being in Rehoboth. It's not great, I mean, there's lots of good things about it, but, it's it is what it is. I would love to have more screening, but when you have a 50 by 100 lot, there isn't a lot of space for screening. So, so that's really what I want to say. But I did find that very interesting. And I was totally unaware of that history. But
Well, it's been like reliving a nightmare in some ways, so.
Any other questions, Jan?
no.
Bill?
I'd like to go back, Ms. Truman, to the quick check factors, because the thing that most concerns me is something you went over fairly quickly, which is the impact on the neighbors and the fact that the city has enacted a 15-foot setback. So can you, address in a little bit more detail the, why it is that we should feel that we should grant a variance that basically overrides the impact of that 15-foot setback? There is a difference, I think, between a deck and a porch, just in terms of the appearance of density between the properties. So I'd like to hear more, because I'm sure we will hear from your neighbor who's objecting, and I like to be able to have in my mind how we balance the quick check factors here, that
Sure.
particular one.
And, as I said, I really haven't been able to read the neighbor's letter, so I hope after they speak, if there's something I can respond to, I can respond. But
I'd ask Fred if we could do that, given the fact that we're all
I haven't
dealing
been
very
able to read
quickly
the
with
letter. It was
this
just handed to
this
me.
letter, and I do want to reiterate what Barry said. I think for the public watching this, if you want to have an effect on something we do, please don't hand it to us 2 hours before a hearing. We all have other things we're doing. It's not fair. It doesn't allow us to digest it. So the reason why we give 30 days notice is so people have an opportunity to understand something, and frankly, so that the 5 of us plus Fred have an opportunity to digest everything. We can't do that.
Bill,
We
I
get a
want to add,
5-page letter.
excuse me for interrupting, and this letter that we just received, we did not get it via email. Will the public who are watching be able to get access to this document?
Once the meeting's over, I'll amend it.
And, okay, so you'll amend the agenda. Thank you, okay.
So,
well,
sorry, thank you,
yeah,
Mr.
thank
Chairman.
you. And certainly, I would have liked to have seen it even Friday, but I'll do the best I can. So I think the point you raised, Mr. Pearlstein, is, in fact, the reason for a variance, that the city adopts a zoning code that applies generally to all kinds of property in the city in different classes and locations and whatever. And it's a general set of rules, and it's probably good 90 or 95 or maybe 99% of the time. But that's why there's a variance process. I can tell you when the 15-foot setback was proposed, I think it was in 2015 or 16, there were a number of people who even had single-family homes on, one single-family home on a lot, and said, well, now I can't do anything in my backyard, and the city said, well, that's what the variance process is for. It's where there really is an unusual situation and extreme practical difficulties doing something that you come in for a variance. We can't buy a shoe that fits every foot, so they had the 15-foot variance. When they did that, I think they also recognized that a huge percentage of properties in town today can't even, with what they have built today, don't meet that. And I mean in terms of not just one piece of property, but the piece of property behind it or next to it, that even before the increase, that the distances from a lot of these pieces of property didn't meet the prior setback, and certainly were not going to meet the new setbacks. But the goal was to pass something that could basically apply in most common situations. And if you believe, and I believe, but I mean, obviously, you're one of the people voting here. If you think that what I've presented is a special condition or an exceptional situation, that is a justification for looking at allowing an encroachment that wouldn't be permitted under the new zoning law that was adopted. And I don't think it undoes the zoning law. I don't think there's very many people, if any, who could come in with this set of facts and show that why their situation requires a different result. I think the house behind me and the porch behind me, fortunately for me and for them, they're back. So it's not a situation like you see in town where things are right on top of each other. So in terms of adverse impact, it's not just adverse impact, it can't be serious adverse impact and or serious negative effect, whatever the term is. But the word is serious, and it's come up in a number of court cases. Yes, this has an effect, but is it really serious? And that's what relates to your judgment on this. And I hope I've presented enough information to show it's not serious in terms of any impact on the neighbor. The other neighbors, there's either neighbors have not said yes or no. They're certainly not here opposing it. Or some of the neighbors, including some next door or within 25 feet away, had said they're supportive. So I'd like to think that when people are supportive, they not only consider, oh yeah, Harvey wants this deck, but they consider themselves and their other neighbors. And would people really be, nobody owes me anything, so would people really be supportive if they felt it was going to create some adverse impact on themselves or on someone who lives next door to them? I don't know if that answers your question, because I think it's, it's not something that's susceptible of mathematical proof.
Understood. Looking at this picture in your neighbor's submission, it looks like there's a second floor deck that's over where you're proposing the over the existing first floor deck, or some sort of porch
It's a
or something?
balcony. It's a balcony.
Balcony?
Yeah.
But that already exists?
Yeah,
in
that's been
terms of-
there for 30 years or so.
So that's already overlooking your neighbor's
Oh, yeah.
property existing today?
And I would say, because they certainly haven't told me, that there have been no problems from that. And that's, as you point out, I mean, that's on the second floor and sees everything.
Just wanted to check that.
We are not, I don't know, maybe I don't need to give testimony on this, or maybe I do, but we're not throwing wild parties. We just want to be out and enjoy a little place to be that's got screening. That's all.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Any final questions for building inspector or the applicant?
Just real quick. The simpler survey is showing a 13-foot distance, and that's the 13 feet of width that you want to use for your deck, but it's also enclosing it at 4.5 feet, so that actually you're going to extend.
Well, okay, it shows 4.5 feet because the back of the house is not straight along, right? Part of the back of the house juts out.
Right.
So the 4.5 feet is already between the more recessed back of the house and where it juts out. Okay, so that's the 4.5 feet.
That's
The
not an
request-
elevated, that's
Pardon me?
not an elevated deck, is it?
Part of it has, yes, part of it.
It is elevated.
Part of it has been, yeah.
The 4.5,
Part of it has been, yeah, it's been like a big landing. I wouldn't call it a deck, but, yeah, that's why there are steps down. You go, it's a functionality of, again, maybe aging and disability status and other things, but the idea is you go from our house right onto something, not require somebody to step down, 2 or 3 steps onto the lower deck. That's
Lower deck.
Yeah, thank you.
all right, I understand.
Okay. All right, at this time, I want to ask the public to speak.
Well, if there's anyone else in favor, I think we would hear from them next, and that might.
You want to do it in favor? Is
That
there
might-
anyone in favor want to speak first? Okay.
Thank you. My name is Eric Muglian. I'm Harvey Shulman's partner of
Okay.
the
Oh, sir, can you give us an address, please?
149B Henlopen Avenue.
Thank you. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience in walking through all those details. Harvey and I have been partners for 35 years and also married. And one thing that brings us here today is we've enjoyed Rehoboth for many, many years and been significant contributors to the development of this community and the beauty of this community, keeping it intact. And what we're trying to do is, as we move into a second period of our life, a period of we're both retiring, planning to spend a little bit more time out here. Right now, we have no outdoor space to use without sitting, with the mosquitoes and the bugs and the this and that. And so this is, I hope Harvey has shared with you and given you comfort how we meet the standards and given you a lot to think about. But it's also, just the quality of life and that transition. You might be wondering why now, and it's the transition that we're going through in our lives in trying to make Rehoboth, more of a permanent, enjoyable residence so we can continue to contribute.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak in favor? Okay. Do you wish to speak? You raised your hand.
Any-
That's why
any opposed?
I'm
Right.
opposed now.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Bergen. I'm an owner of 6 St. Michael's Place, and I first want to apologize to you all.
One second.
Okay, you
Ma'am,
wanna-
do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I sure do, yes.
Thank you.
First of all, I want to apologize to the board members. I'm a novice at this. I've never done this before. I'm not an attorney. I speak in layman terms, what have you. So I was not aware that I had to submit this. I called Ann earlier this morning and I ran it over. So once again, I apologize. And my intent was just to come actually just read what I had put together, if that's okay. Okay, sorry. All right. So, for almost 31 years, Marilyn North, and Marilyn North is behind me, she's my partner of 33 years, have owned the property at 6 St. Michael's Place, Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. Marilyn and Elizabeth are the original owners of the property. Lot 3, 6 St. Michael's Place, is directly behind 149B Henlopen Avenue. Although the applicant has been soliciting the neighborhood in support of his variance request, he has not sought our views or support. It should be noted that the properties directly and adversely affected by this variance are in the rear of 149 Henlopen Avenue, which includes 4 St. Michael's Place and then our property, 6 St. Michael's Place. And that the opinions of these owners who are adversely affected and directly affected should weigh heavily in your decision on what you do here. Marilyn and Elizabeth strongly oppose the request for variance to allow the encroachment of actually 10 feet and not 8 feet as the applicant claims into the rear yard setback. The application for variance special exception, applicant seeks to add a screen porch 7.5 deep, 13 feet wide against the rear of his home, as well as 24 inches, which is 2 feet, for 2 48 wide steps to encroach from the porch to its ground level. The addition of the 2 feet for the steps equates to a total of 10 feet, encroaching in the 15-foot rear setback. This is documented in the applicant's supplemental letter, in which the applicant states, the applicant requests a variance to allow the screen porch to be as close as 7 feet to the rear property line and the 2 steps to be as close as 5 feet to the rear property line, meaning the steps, based on his own documentation, says it'll be 5 feet close to the property line. The applicant also claims the separation between 4 and 6 St. Michael's Place and 149B Henlopen Avenue would be a healthy distance. Those were his terms. This claim is, in my opinion, ridiculous. Having a permanent structure 5 feet from an owner's property line is not a healthy distance. The established setback is the predetermined healthy and allowable distance according to city regulations. That's why we established the 15-foot rear setback. I go on to say that the Commissioners of the City of Rehoboth Beach on July 17, 2015, adopted that ordinance that allows for that 15-foot setback, changing it from 10 to 15 feet. And what was included in that was in the R1 and R2 districts to change that from 10 to 15. So why change the rear yard setback? Why did the city do that? At the time, the zoning code required a rear yard setback of 10 feet. The commissioners determined the 10 feet provided, and this is what they stated, an inadequate separation to ensure light and air could reach all homes and yards and contributed to noise from one property carrying to the other. The 10-foot setbacks were determined to not be in keeping with good planning practices. This ordinance increased the rear setbacks into 15 feet, a minimum of 15 feet. According to the Board of Adjustment application, the applicant must provide grounds of hardship upon which a request for special exception is being made. Pursuant to Section 270-74C of the Code of City of Rehoboth, to authorize in specific cases such variance from any zoning ordinance, code, or regulation that will not be contrary to public interest, where owing to special conditions or exceptional situations, a literal interpretation of any zoning ordinance, code, or regulation will result in unnecessary hardship or exceptional practice difficulties to the owner of the property, so that the spirit of the ordinance, code, or regulation shall be observed and substantial justice done, provided that such relief may be granted without substantially impairing the intent and purpose of any zoning ordinance, code, or regulation or map. The special conditions or exceptional situations. The applicant is asking the Board of Adjustment to consider 4 factors in the quick check case. One of those factors is whether, if the restriction upon the applicant's property were removed, would seriously affect such neighboring property and uses. Obviously, erecting a permanent height structure, which we talked about going vertical, 5 feet from the 4 St. Michael's and 6 St. Michael's property lines would have an adverse effect. As aforementioned, that was the reason why the commissioners adopted in 2015 the 15-foot rear setback as being, the 10 being inadequate separation. In addition, as applicant outlined in his supplemental letter, the 4 St. Michael's and 6 St. Michael's property lines were reduced by 3 feet by the erection of fences on the properties. There was a mutual agreement, and I would like to explain this to you. When Marilyn and I purchased the property, we bought a lot 50 by 100, 5,000 square feet. We learned of this easement, and I think the applicant provided the easement in his records. And we were told that if you were to put a fence, the first person to put a fence up would lose that 3 feet, okay? At the time, and we still do, have pets. So obviously, we put up a fence. So you will see in one of the photos there, I show you my fence line, how it goes in 3 feet, because I no longer have access to that 3 feet. So that 3 feet is now on the side of the applicant's fence, okay? After I put the fence in, the applicant put his own fence up, right up against my fence. So you can see I don't have access to that 3 feet. So in my opinion, I've already given 3 feet of my property to the applicant. All right. With regards to the history of the special conditions and exception situation, the applicant also states in the supplemental letter, the settlement of the SMP subdivision dispute was deemed to be the best interest of, and he goes into saying the Epworth, the city, himself and his neighbor, and all involved. Okay, so at that time, when he did the quit claim, he deemed it was be in the best interest of everyone. So now, today, he comes and says, well, maybe it wasn't in the best interest of me, but he did, at that time, say it was and signed to that. Also, applicant claims having 2 physically separated single-family homes on 5,000 square foot lot creates special conditions and exceptional situation. When the applicant purchased his home at 149B Henlopen Avenue, did he not know that that home was in front of his on the same lot? Of course he did. He had full knowledge of this, but he purchased the home as is. In addition, since purchasing the home, the applicant has made significant renovations, increasing the size from 1 level to 2 levels. At that time, the applicant had the opportunity to configure the home to accommodate a screen porch, but he did not. Rear setback and result of unnecessary hardship. What is the definition of a hardship? A condition that is difficult to endure, suffering, deprivation, oppression. These are all from the dictionary. Most courts recognize hardship as having one or all of the following: a long-term negative financial impact on a party, deprivation, suffering, or adversity for one or more parties. The applicant states that mosquitoes present a hardship. This is hardly deprivation, suffering, or oppression. In any neighborhood, such as Rehoboth Beach, Dewey, Lewis, and Bethany Beach, homeowners are faced with pests. There are viable solutions to dealing with these pests, i.e. spraying one's property, installation of bat houses, which, by the way, the owner of 149A has stated to me that she was going to put bat houses on her property to alleviate the mosquitoes. In fact, Mosquito Authority, which is the service that I use, allows the property owner to have their property sprayed every 28 days. It includes a guarantee that if a mosquito is present at any point after the initial spray, they will come back free of charge and spray your property again. I've had that service for years and have had no problems with mosquito, and I work in my yard all the time. All right. So in this case, it appears that the applicant would like to build a screen porch for convenience and not hardship. Many other residents would prefer to have conveniences on the properties: swimming pools, garages. We redid our house back in 2016. We wanted a stone fireplace on the side of our home. Okay, would be great for the value of the home, but it was in the setback. We couldn't. So what did we have to do? We had to reconfigure the interior of our home because we couldn't have that convenience that we wanted. All right, to me, these are not hardships that the applicant is claiming. As stated earlier, granting a variance for convenience rather than a hardship sets a damaging precedent and should not be allowed. I trust, and so does Marilyn, that the applicant's past affiliation with the city of Rehoboth would have no bearing on the board's decision. Preferential treatment should not be given to the applicant because of his past association with the city. And I ask that this fervent objection please be entered into the record of today's hearing. And I just want to show you the pictures, and you can clearly see there are no mature trees that show between my property, or Marilyn and our property, and the applicant's property. I took these pictures. You can still see there's leaves on the tree. I took these pictures the other day. There are no low branches above my fence line, okay, that is going to protect the view. And you can see that in all cases. And yeah, I'm not sure what the applicant is referring to, a tree. We redid our home in 2016, and it took us almost 2 years to do because of all the regulations that have to go into it. And so we know about the tree ordinance. We've never taken down a tree. We have trimmed trees. We have oak trees in the front of our yard, and we have trimmed those, but have never taken down a tree. So with that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
When you were taking these photographs, were you standing on the ground, on a ladder, on your
Okay,
deck?
I'll tell you, to be very specific. All right, figure 1. All right, figure 1, I'm standing on the ground of my property,
Okay.
and there is a porch that I'm right up against, and that's the view that you see in
Okay.
figure 1. I want to show you in figure, I think it's figure 3. Figure 3, I'm actually on my porch.
Okay.
And on my porch, you can see that's why it's up higher, because the way my porch sits. I'm actually on my porch, on the edge of my porch. We actually have these plastic screens that come down.
Oh, I can see you're actually taking the picture through the screening.
Okay.
Okay,
All
on
right.
figure 3.
So
Okay.
that's it.
Thank you.
The view. And then the last picture, I just wanted to reemphasize the 3 feet that we lost when we put up the fence. You can see the fence line, and I had this fence done this past year to replace the existing fence. And you can see where it squares off there, where I lose my property line.
Okay, thank you.
Birgit, may I ask a question?
Sure.
It's not an attractive view as it is.
No, it's not.
Why wouldn't you want an improvement?
Well, because of the verticalness of it, okay? I don't want to have to be looking at that.
I'm thinking that if somebody's sitting here now and a screen porch goes in, you will see less of them. I mean, you see them out through a screen. I'm thinking that the improvement is going to be a better view. No?
No, I don't believe that when somebody moves 5 feet from my property line.
Well, they're already there. He can sit on his deck tomorrow.
No, he's not 5 feet from my property line now. He's not. His deck does not go 5 feet to my property line.
Well, neither, his deck is already existing. He can sit
His
anywhere
deck,
he wants on
his deck is, but his deck is further, closer to his home. He's asking to bring his deck out, right?
No.
No.
he's not.
No?
No.
He's going to build
No,
on
he's
top
not.
of the deck.
Okay, so he's going to build on top of the deck and the
Right where this
steps.
wood is,
And
right?
where is the steps going to come down? So let me ask you this, why would
They're on the deck.
why would you grant a variance? Why does he need to go 10 feet into the property line?
This is your opportunity to tell us why it is you think that he's not met the standard. And I think you've done that, but we don't typically engage in a debate during these.
But
Okay.
Wouldn't it be helpful, Fred, to, if there's a misunderstanding, one way or the other? So let me see if I can correctly say what I think is going on here. I think what is going on here is you're putting a porch on top of an existing deck. That you're going up higher, but you're not coming closer to the property. Is that correct?
That it's only over. It's okay, but it's not over the entirety of
No,
the deck.
but
It's almost entirely correct in the sense there already is an area, landing, whatever, that's a number of feet,
wood
that's
planks, wood
higher.
planks.
You have a
And,
deck.
and this is so yes, we're basically extending what's already there on the higher portion where you walk out of our house. So it can be a porch that's enclosed with screens. Okay, the statement that,
No.
okay,
just
so
a
yeah,
direct-
it's, we're not adding, we're not,
Getting closer to their property line.
absolutely not.
And not enclosing the entirety of the deck that's shown on this simpler survey.
Only 29% of the existing rear deck would be
The
closed.
reason I wanted to do that is from, I
her
thought the
benefit.
witness
For your
was
benefit,
saying they are coming closer to the property line in terms of where they will be sitting outside. And my understanding, and please correct me, Mr. Chairman, if I'm wrong, is you will not be sitting closer to the property line inside the screened porch than you are sitting today on the unscreened deck.
Correct.
Is that correct or not correct?
Correct. It's
My- that's
correct,
my
and
fault,
with
Dan,
the
I'm sorry.
screen porch, we will actually be sitting much farther back from the property line.
Closer to your house.
Absolutely.
So just so I understand, okay?
I think these lines will help you. Am I correct that these 2x4s or whatever they are an outline?
Is that where the porch is
That's
going
what
to
it's going
end?
to be.
No, it goes 3 feet beyond that.
All right, 3 feet beyond that, so.
Right, exactly.
So that's where
So-
where
so-
the applicant's existing deck ends today. Where those stanchions are up, his deck ends there.
And they
No,
will end
no,
there.
that's-
He's
One
saying
at
it's
a-
going to be
one at a
extended.
time.
He just
No,
said-
the deck
No,
is.
no, no.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
sorry.
Poor Ann has to figure all this
I
out.
apologize.
Okay. Do you want,
Maybe we can come back to
Yes.
this.
Okay, I was going to say, Fred, you got a handle on it.
So,
Okay.
so we're not able to show the simpler survey on our projector, right? Do we have another one? Mine's got some writing on it.
Wait,
Thanks, Matt.
is this the one you want?
Yours is good. Yeah, that's
Yes.
fine.
I just put northeast,
okay.
southwest, so I could
I don't know
orient
what else is
myself
on there.
when I went there, so I knew what the heck I was actually doing, sort of.
Matt, would you be able to explain this through the microphone? Do you know where that is? And then if Mr. Schulman has an objection to what you represent, then we can allow him to do that. We're going to let him describe where it's going to go, and if you object to that, then we will address
Pull
it.
it down just a little bit. Pull it down just a little bit, Matt, because what's important is the thing that's actually at the top of the screen. Right, there we go.
All right, so you can see here that the deck already exists.
That's the back of the house.
This is the back portion of the lot, right, of the parcel. This is the rear of it with the abutting property here. This deck is existing, and this is the area here with the smaller deck that they are proposing to build out 3
3 feet.
3 and some
3.2
change.
feet, something like that.
3 and some change out. So this would actually, in structure, in structure vertically, it would increase at this level. But the deck, sorry about that, the deck does not grow in size any closer to the property line than what is already existing.
So there, can you show us also where the steps are going to be?
Matt, you can write on that. It's my copy, but I can print another one at home.
Well,
I don't have a pen.
I don't know if that's necessary.
I mean, if that makes it clear, feel free to write whatever you want instead
Well,
of
then
pointing.
you could, not to scale, but you could draw, this is what I was trying to avoid. No, I don't think that's right.
So from what,
No,
So,
no.
so the small square, as I understand it, that has a 4.4, that's going to be extended 3 feet.
There we go.
And then the steps are going to be not that direction, but to the side, right?
now,
No, they're going that
not
way.
from his,
They're going to go towards the rear
The rear
boundary
property
line?
line.
correct.
Okay. Okay.
Can't go to the side because then the steps would actually leave you off walking into a bunch of holly trees and bushes.
Well, it
and
looks
stuff.
like they would still be on the deck.
Yes,
They would
all-
be.
The current deck goes all the way back. You see that gray shaded area?
Yes, right.
That's where the current deck is.
Okay.
Okay, this is going to be not even
Less.
close to the end of that
Right.
Right.
current deck.
Okay, I just thought that the steps entering from that side were going to be coming from the right portion of the,
It's literally impossible because the plantings and trees there are so thick, a human being couldn't even squeeze through there.
but it would still be on the deck.
Yes, it would be on the
Okay,
deck.
but
They're
you've
on the
got
deck.
plantings on, you don't have plantings on the deck. And then you've got, and then you have steps coming off the other side also?
No steps off
Okay,
the other side.
all right.
That's the only step.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Ms. Bergen, does that make it clearer to
Yeah,
you?
that's fine. The only thing that I wanted to stress with the board is that it is our belief that using mosquitoes as a hardship is just totally ridiculous because there are other remedies to that. And I think that would set a terrible precedent for the other neighbors, especially for those, and I know you don't like to compare to others, but people that haven't gotten what they've wanted in the past. So I just think, I mean, every neighbor in every neighborhood deals with pests, and there's other remedies other than having to screen and porch. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and once again, I apologize for not having this to you sooner.
So I do have before you sit down, I have a comment I want to make. I hope this doesn't make things worse. But the quick check standards refer to unnecessary hardship, but also to exceptional practical difficulties. Generally speaking, when the courts are applying the standard to variance applications, as area variances as opposed to use variances, they apply what's called the exceptional practical difficulty component of the quick check case as opposed to the unnecessary hardship component, which is reserved by courts for use variances, which are harder to achieve. I presume you feel the same way about this application if we were to apply the exceptional practical difficulty test, or you would object to the applicant's reasoning or effort to say that he's got a difficulty in the same way you would if it were a hardship. I know you indicated that you weren't a lawyer. We don't.
Right.
But in your case, you actually defined hardship, and you went to the trouble to pull it. Maybe you got Webster's out and whatever, and it brought to light this issue. We sometimes use the term or terms unnecessary hardship and exceptional practical difficulty interchangeably, and they are somewhat different. So that's. But to be fair to you, you feel the same way, whether he's asserting a difficulty or asserting a hardship, you feel like it's insufficient.
That's correct.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, is there anyone else to speak against?
Hi, I'm John Stolson, and I'm at 155 Henlopen.
And sir, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
It will be. Can I sit down?
I think.
That would be helpful.
Yeah.
Are you going to make yourself really comfortable?
Yeah.
Because
After an hour and 30 minutes of this, I certainly am going to make myself comfortable.
Well, we've been pretty lenient in terms of the amount of time we've allowed our speakers to go. It applied to the applicant. It is applied to our second individual who's testified, and we do need to be fair to the rest of our applicants or the rest of our agenda.
All
So,
right.
so please be concise if you can.
I won't. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to be concise because the others haven't, so I've got my fair time. So, again, my name is John Stolson, and I live about 4 houses down from Harvey. 155 Henlopen, same side of the street. Wife and I constructed our home in 1999. Moved in January of 2000. So we've known Harvey for 20 plus years. It's a nice neighborhood. We've got a great group of people, and there are about 6 of us that are permanent on the street, in the block. We all try and support each other. We all try and help each other, et cetera, et cetera. So when I read Harvey's variance, my first reaction was, A, what is it? And B, the second question is, can I support it? And unfortunately, I cannot support it. And I cannot support it for a number of reasons. One, I have to clarify and I have to correct statements that he's made in his application.
Well, and that's fine, but we're going to ask that your corrections refer to appropriate considerations for this group. So if
How about
he's-
the written application?
Well, no, because the written application includes a lot of background, much of which is irrelevant.
This stuff will be relevant.
Okay, well, what it needs to be relevant to is the 4 quick check factors.
And it will. It's stated in this
and-
quick check.
Okay.
Okay? specifically in his quick check.
Well, no, what I was pointing out was that a fair amount of that application was devoted to the history of the St. Michael's Place, which is not a relevant consideration for this group. This group is looking for evidence or lack of evidence for the presence of an exceptional practical difficulty.
And that's the part of the application that I will address.
All right.
Okay? There's, and I'm going to pose it for the application itself. I'm going to oppose it because I think there are provisions in the zoning code that you need to be aware of. And you certainly brought some of them up, and I'm going to talk about them. I'm going to talk about it because of the implications for the whole city. And I'm also going to talk about it because I do not believe it's a justifiable practical difficulty, all right? So let's start. We talked a little bit about R1 and R2, and I know there was some confusion up here about R1 and R2, and even Matt had some confusion about R1 and R2 and what district.
I don't think there's any confusion. I think that there was a typo, and he meant to
a
say R2. It
clarification.
was a clerical error. That was it. We all know what an R1 and an R2 are.
My error. So I want to add to the R2 area. Having been a resident there for about 20 years, I'm kind of familiar with the R2 blocks. Because Henlopen Avenue is the last street in the angle of all of Rehoboth, we border up against that canal. And because of that canal, there are several lots that they're not 50 by 100. They become 50 by 50. They become 50 by 60, become 48. What I'm saying is they're very similar to, they're substantially the equivalent of, okay, an R2 lot, a conforming R2 lot that has two houses on it. Essentially, not legally, but essentially each of those two houses has 50 by 50 of the lot. All right? So some of these other lots are substantially the equivalent thereof. Now here's where I want to get in practical application here. 2 years ago, the lot or the house in front of Harvey was sold for a little over $500,000. The house right across the street from me, same time frame, sold for $1.8 million. The house down the street, next block down, that needed a lot of renovation work.
Can you get to your, because I don't care about, we just look at the zoning code.
Okay,
That's all we care about.
the reason in the great disparity in the cost is because of the zoning code. Buyers know that if they're going to buy a house, a small little house on an R2 lot, they're not going to be able to do near as many things as someone who can buy a regular house on a regular lot. They just can't do it. They're going to have limitations, and they're going to have.
But a buyer
restrictions.
understands it, so I don't understand your point.
My point is, when Harvey bought his house, he knew that he was going to have zoning limitations and zoning
Understood.
restrictions.
That's all you had to say. Okay, thank you.
Okay? So he, as a buyer, knows that he's going to have more restrictions, more limitations, more difficulties in being able to meet the zoning code than somebody who otherwise buys a single-family home on a single lot. I mean, that's practical. That's what happens. So let's then, and I'm going to try and speed it up for you, okay? I had some other things that I definitely wanted to say. But let's go to page 10. And in page 10, he says down at the very bottom, he says, and I quote, the applicant's unusual situation appears to be very rare, if not unique, in Rehoboth Beach. The applicant's situation is to be very rare or unique. Well, I'm going to rattle off 14 different different lots that are exactly like Harvey's or substantially the equivalent of.
Yeah,
They,
I don't know if that's going to help us.
well, I think in this context, they lend credence to the fact that his situation is not rare, and his situation is not unique. There are several lots with 2 dwellings, 2 different owners, right in our block that have the same conditions that he has.
So I do have to say that the courts have specifically taken on this question of whether or not an applicant has to bring unique circumstances to justify a Board of Adjustment variance, and the answer is no. It does not have to be unique. His circumstances have to be special in some respect, but not unique. And also, if not entirely unique. And number 2, the question of whether the applicant knew the circumstances of his lot is not also a disqualifying factor. So you can buy a lot that has certain circumstances or special circumstances about it, which doesn't forbid you from seeking a variance. You still have to prove that you've got an exceptional practical difficulty, but you do not have to persuade the Board of Adjustment to come to that conclusion.
Okay, fine, fine. But his situation is not unique, and his situation certainly isn't rare. Okay, so let's move on to the provisions of the zoning code itself. My next-door neighbor, approximately 10 years ago, wanted to put an extension on the front of his house. He wanted to put a porch on the front of his house. Made all. You gave Harvey an hour and a half. You ought to be able to at least give me 20 minutes, okay? And so, I mean, I think this is important. I mean, all these board members are looking at me, and they want to hear this information. I think it's only right that I be allowed to present 20 minutes worth of what I consider to be fundamentally relevant information. I'm not talking about trees. I'm not talking about 2 feet of the porch or whatever, the steps or whatever. I'm talking about relevant information.
But again, we as a board do not use other cases that the city has seen. So it has to apply to this specific lot, to your concerns, your objections to the 15-foot rear yard setback, the one code that we need a variance over. That's all.
Let me ask you this question. If you want to increase the FAR of your particular dwelling, do you then otherwise have to meet the building code?
Of course you have to meet the building code.
If you want to increase the FAR of your dwelling. So let's go to the survey. Let's all look at the survey. In the back, he says that he wants to just use part of the porch. He wants to use just part of the existing deck, and it encroaches into the 15-foot setback. So obviously, if he's just going to use part of that deck, he needs to get rid of the rest of the deck. Minor point. The side, okay, he probably has to get rid of. But did you notice on the survey that he didn't say anything about parking? Where are his 4 parking spots? The code specifically says that each parking spot is 9 by 18. The code also says in section 270.35 delta that you must have 2 parking spots per dwelling. I mean, that's what the code says.
That's what we're here for.
But he has to get a building permit to be able to then construct the porch.
Get a building permit if this is approved today.
Speak into the mic, Mark, please.
He can get a building permit if this is approved
So
today.
Again, we're only looking at the one code here.
What you're saying to me is that he can have 3 or 4 already existing deficiencies in the code, if you grant him a variance, he can then have the fifth one. In other words, if you look at the survey, if you look at his dwelling, if you look at his actual house right now, on one side, it's 6 feet. On the other side, it's 8 feet. So
So the record, the testimony we have in the record is that this house is legal non-conforming
Legal
in its
non-conforming.
in its current circumstances.
exactly.
So it can be occupied as a dwelling, and regardless of how we treat this application, whether his variance is granted or denied, it can continue to be operated or occupied as a dwelling. So that doesn't change.
So what
He's
you're
not seeking a variance from any other, he's seeking one variance. And if it turned out that he neglected to obtain another variance that he needed in order to secure his building permit, then the building permit wouldn't be issued and
And
he'd
Matt
have
would
to
have
come back.
alerted us to that.
So you're saying, so that all the provisions of the structures, he does not have to follow the existing zoning code if he wants to add to his FAR. He doesn't have to do that.
Well,
That's what you're saying.
we were told that the square footage attributable to the construction of this covered porch, if added to the existing square footage, this is what the record suggests, would leave him compliant with
The FAR.
With the FAR.
It wouldn't leave him compliant with all the other provisions of the zoning code.
But
Why
there-
did you pick out the FAR? Why did you just pick out the FAR? How come you didn't pick out the setbacks? What?
Because building this only affects the FAR. Building this has nothing to do with his parking lot.
Correct? He put a roof over top of he proposes to put a roof over the top of a porch, which will increase the FAR, which is still compliant under his FAR limit, allowances.
Well, then, does this apply, the use, his use? Does the use apply because,
See, let's not,
So,
this is not a use variance, sir.
so this is your opportunity to tell us why he hasn't met the criteria that are applicable to the variance. And it's not, again, as I instructed Ms. Bergen, this is not a dialogue back and forth where you ask questions of us. This is your opportunity to tell us why the applicant shouldn't
I'm trying,
receive
and then you interrupt me, and you tell
Well,
me
you're
this
asking
doesn't
questions.
apply.
You're asking questions.
Okay,
of
well,
us.
I won't ask questions, okay? So what I'll do then is I'll continue. If you grant this variance, other people are going to come in, and other people are going to do the same exact thing. They are going to put up porches because they have existing decks on the back of their properties. There are people throughout this town, probably Country Club Estates is probably a prime example. These people probably have in their backyards, they probably have a deck that's probably 10 by 20. They're going to come in here and they're going to say the same thing. I'm in the setback. I don't bust the FAR. I have mosquitoes. I have bugs. I have bees. And they're going to put up a real nice porch. Then in that porch, they're going to put a hot tub in the corner. They're going to put a fire pit in the middle. They're putting a barbecue grill over on the other side with 2 Sonos speakers. And the neighbors are they're going to scream like hell. They're going to scream like hell. And they're going to say, what the hell are we doing? We said, we voted in this town that what we wanted to do was we wanted to not have these types of things. Democracy at work. We said 15 feet. Don't break the 15 feet. Do not break, and don't break the side setbacks of 16. And we don't have enough off-site parking, so we got to have 2 parking spots per dwelling. Now, you know, let's just give candy to everybody. People like to have it. It's nice to have. I'd like to have a swimming pool. I mean, the applicant says that everybody in the block has a porch. Well, hell's bells. He's been here for 38 years, and his next-door neighbor doesn't even have a screen porch. Did you realize his next-door neighbor does not have a screen porch? I'm at 155 Henlopen. He's been over my house for parties. He was over at my house just 6 weeks
Sir,
ago. I don't have a porch. I'm a screen porch. But these are relevant. This is important because
No, other neighbors are not relevant
Okay.
here.
Okay, well, Then let's go to the hardship. The practical difficulty. For 36 years, he didn't have a problem with mosquitoes. He's owned the place for 38 years. For 36 years, he didn't have a problem with mosquitoes. Now, all of a sudden, he has problems with mosquitoes. Well, let's address the elephant in the room. I don't know if you've looked at the property. I don't know if you've seen the property because the front house was just sold 2 years ago. The building inspector can tell you that he's been out there several times to do different types of building inspections, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to refer to the property as, because this is being zoomed, because this is public record, I'm going to refer to lot 149 as extra special. It's unique. It's one of a kind. It's not to be duplicated very often. I'm trying to use good language. If you were to go on the property, there's stuff everywhere. There's stuff in the back. There's stuff on the side. There's a utility trailer, an older utility trailer, that has stuff underneath it. It has stuff in it. It has a tarp over it. It hasn't moved in 10 months. There's a tree in the front yard. But it's important.
You say it's important, but in what way does that relate to
To a 15-yard setback,
to
sir.
the application?
It's related to the mosquitoes.
And have you called the city about that?
Yes, we have.
And I'm sure they're addressing it for you.
And I would say they haven't because it's been going on for 2
But
years.
the Board of Adjustment, we do not go out and
But what
address
you can do is
mosquitoes.
you can use it in reference to the mosquito problem, because you can say if they would clean up the property, and if they would then maybe get a spray company out there, they could solve the mosquito problem versus going to the nuclear solution, which is we need to have a screen porch. There are intermediate steps that you can take, all right?
Sir, I didn't realize what direction you were going in with your comments, so I just wanted to.
Okay. I mean, if you would cut down a tree, the tree has been dead for 15 years. It's been dead for 15 years. It's got vines growing up all over it. The vines have come all the way back down to the ground. If you would clean up the property, if you would have it sprayed by a professional, you know, they say on the side of their cars, guaranteed. Just like the other individual said, we guarantee you will not have mosquitoes. We don't need to go to the nuclear option, which is a screen porch. Let's try and do some intermediate level things first. Now, I will end it this way. The applicant said, and he's so proud of the fact that with the litigation, he was able to get the road behind him to not be behind him, to go to the other side, to go over towards Henlopen Acres. Just think if behind his house, he had an open area, because I went and I measured the road, St. Michael's Place. It's 40 feet from the fence on Henlopen Acres to the other side of the street. If he had 40 feet of the street, plus he had 15 more feet to the front steps of the next house, he probably would reduce his difficulty with mosquitoes. I suggest to you that because the houses are behind him, there are shrubs, bushes, and guess what? There are gutters. And gutters bring water down. And that adds to the mosquito problem. He was part of the problem with the mosquitoes. If they clean up the property that is extraordinary, unique, one of a kind, special, not to be duplicated anywhere on Henlopen Avenue, they would fix the problem, and you don't need to go to the nuclear option of the screened porch. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, at this point, there's no one else to speak. Mr.
I just want to factually correct the record. I don't
Is it really necessary?
I don't think so.
I don't know which way you're going to vote, and if you're going to rely on something that he said that's inaccurate, or the other neighbor said
If you hold your
Hold
thought.
for a second.
I'm not arguing, I just want
Okay.
Microphone, yeah.
Well, no, not just yet. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in opposition to the application? I see a hand go up.
Good afternoon. My name is Walter Brittingham, 123 Henlopen Avenue.
Mr. Brittingham, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Thank you. First of all, I'm a Rehoboth fireman. Changing subjects. Have the pictures that you've been shown, did they go out in the embedded part of the process? So you end up.
the applicant's
You end up with
pictures.
pictures that we haven't seen. It is my own fault that I did not know that there was 99 pages embedded
Right.
on the report.
And there will be more after this
Pardon?
letter this afternoon, so
was
Ann will amend it.
Well,
It's actually 120 pages.
okay, and I'm looking, Ann does a wonderful job. She said it was 12 to 111, so I just took that as 99 pages. But I say this, first of all, it's relative. John had a statement, and my property at 123 Henlopen Avenue is 250 by 100s, but my property is actually 165 foot deep. And it is relevant, and I went down to St. Michael Place, and I parked at the front, and I parked at the back, and I walked through halfway to the property, I think at number 2, yes, I trespassed, and then I stopped. But it looks to me like, it is my opinion that the 15-foot setback on both properties is appropriate. One of the reasons for it is for fire protection. I don't know the distance. I didn't do the download like I should have. I wasn't careful. But what is the back of one property to the back of the other property? And one of the reasons to have 15 foot on each side is to have 30 foot. God help there be a fire down that way. It's just part of the area. It's the north end of Rehoboth. It's unique, but they knew what it was beforehand. And it's one thing to have a porch. It's one thing when you put a roof. I haven't seen the pictures again, so I don't know what the roof is going to look like, but you need openness to stop fire spread also. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? Okay, at this time, we're closing the public portion of the Board of Adjustment here for this case, and the board will now discuss it among ourselves, and then we will make a vote. So, anyone wish to start the conversation?
Harry, I'll point out that we have an existing encroachment, and in my opinion, we are only improving the existing encroachment. We're not making it any larger. We are improving it. And with the exception of a possible barrier for some sort of a tree, I don't think that it affects the neighborhood any more negatively than it's currently being affected. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
I agree with you, Mark. I think it's an exceptional practical difficult. I'm even louder in here. Okay, I think it's an exceptional practical difficulty, and I agree with you. We're not increasing anything, and I think it's probably going to be better looking for everybody.
Yeah.
So if I could, and this was the testimony that was given by Mr. Janis, and that is that a variance was required. And I'm not arguing this one way or the other, but I'm saying in terms of this discussion, variance was required because if you were to construct or add structure in an area height-wise,
Yeah.
then you are said to be aggravating the existing nonconformity.
Right.
So technically speaking, you are aggravating the nonconformity And the question is whether that aggravation is justified by the applicant's exceptional practical difficulty.
Yeah, I do think that the height density issue, which is really what we're talking about here, is a real issue. I want to hear what my colleagues have to say, but I do think that there's a difference in terms of the appearance of density on lots between a porch that's got a roof and a deck in terms of what the overall density of the, we have coverage limitations which are different than what would be in the FAR. So I do want to hear what other folks say, but I do understand, to me, there is a difference, and I think that the different factors that in the zoning code between coverage on the one hand and FAR on the other does reflect that.
Yeah. I mean, to me, the first two quick check items are met easily. I mean, there's no issue in my mind, quick check item number 1 or 2. It's 3 and 4 that I'm hung up on. I agree with Bill. We're talking vertical density. I mean, it's now a structure that will be, it's these two porches are very, very close in my mind. And, we are looking for that separation. I mean, as far as the mosquitoes are concerned, I mean, owning the property for 40 years, they bit you 40 years ago, they bit you 30 years ago, they're going to bite you again. That's hard for me to accept as an exceptional practical difficulty. I agree with you, it's a problem, but 40 years later, that's a tough practical difficulty for me to accept where my head's at.
Can I just, I want to say that my neighbor uses mosquito control. They come and spray, and we have asked them not to spray on the borderline for our property because the mosquito spray kills everything.
Everything.
It kills bees. Unfortunately, it doesn't kill crepe myrtle bark disease,
Right.
but it kills just about, yeah, I know, about everything else.
I mean, to me,
it is to me a totally
that to me
inappropriate thing
that
to do.
I agree with you, Jan. To me, that's the nuclear option because
Right.
you're killing everything.
Exactly,
you
you're
know.
killing everything.
Absolutely.
So, and I'd have to disagree with you. We had a screen porch. We had enough. It was already roofed, so we just enclosed it. I think the screen. He's already encroaching. I don't think adding a 7.5 by whatever it wasn't very long, over the deck at their back door is going to be hideous or make this
And I do respect that he has kept this to the barest
to the
of
barest minimum.
minimums. Yes.
And I think that it is the appropriate thing to do. I would hate to see. I've never been in his backyard actually. I know what the front looks like, but it's heavily wooded, and I don't think I would. Again, I'd have to say about if you don't live in a heavily wooded area like ours isn't, I mean, I hear the people across the street from me on their porch. I can listen to their phone conversations. It is the nature of being in Rehoboth.
Yeah.
There is no,
Edie, thoughts?
Well, I'm going to agree with you that the first two factors, quick check factors, are no-brainers. They're yes, yes. Asking my colleagues here, do any of you, or how do you feel about the perception, use Bill's idea, of density, the change in perception of density of a porch versus a deck? How detrimental do you think that is to the property that we've heard about?
It does add to the FAR, right, Matt?
It does.
Because of the roof.
Yeah,
But it
because
still
of the
keeps
roof,
them
because
below.
it's enclosed.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying that the point I'm making is that there's a difference between a deck, which doesn't count on the FAR, it's
Right.
coverage.
it's coverage, lot coverage.
Lot
Lot
coverage,
coverage.
but not
My
FAR.
understanding is we are not addressing lot coverage here. Lot coverage, I think,
That is correct. We are
unchanged.
not
So
addressing.
what we are effectively doing is allowing something that counts against the FAR, which is habitable usage in the setback. I think that's really what we're talking about here. You know, how do we feel about habitable usage, which is why it counts against FAR, in the setback? And that seems to me to be what the real issue is. And if I got it wrong, Matt, please tell me. But that's what I think this is about.
And you see, I think a deck is habitable, whether, you know, they agree with me or not. I think a deck is habitable, so I don't see really, you know, to put a roof over it and screens around it, you can see right through the screens. I mean, it's not like a wall, and they're covering the whole deck. They're only covering part of it, and I don't see the issue.
I think I answered your
Yeah, you did.
your question.
But I wondered if any of my other colleagues here felt differently about that, or,
Well, I think because there's a difference between a screen and a porch, and you know, an enclosed porch. This is an enclosed porch. If Mr. Schulman and 3 friends are sitting in the screen, you'll see them almost as much as you would see them if they weren't. So the density, because it's just a screen, it doesn't bother me much. They're not hiding.
The roof structures and the support add that vertical density, and that does not bother you then?
It doesn't.
Okay.
and there's also already a balcony in that
Above it.
visual space, in that same visual space. It isn't, you're not taking a flat wall and just adding a
You're going
roof line.
underneath of it.
You
to
go underneath it
Yeah.
where there's a balcony that goes out into that area.
And again, we have the opportunity to compromise by asking that a screen of some sort, a tree or whatever, be placed between number 5 or 6 or whatever it is, St. Michael's and the subject.
We
that
we
we
do have that ability.
Ease any bad feelings between neighbors, we'll say.
Okay.
Arborvitae is
so
a
with-
good,
Yeah, so.
What is
So
the
if
exceptional, what's the exceptional practical difficulty?
in my opinion.
Yeah.
My opinion is they gave up land so that
Even
St.
if they
Michael's
had,
Place.
even if they hadn't, it's still going to be within the 15 feet. The
But-
three
But we
feet does.
changed it would
Yeah.
have for them because the code changed from 10
Yeah.
to 15.
I understand, but you're,
And if they
you've got
had
two
built a
things.
screen porch that many years ago, then it wouldn't have mattered because I don't even think we had something
Yeah, but I
in
don't
40 years
think
ago.
that we normally are saying somebody could have done something before the code
Right.
changed, that it becomes an exceptional practical difficulty. That swallows the rule, frankly.
Exactly,
Say that again, Bill?
I mean, the fact that they could have built it
years ago.
years ago, if A, they hadn't given up the 3, and B, they had done it within the 10. They weren't within the 10 ever because of the 3. So you've got the 3-foot buffer, and you're saying that they could have, when it was 10, come in and sought a variance. It wouldn't have been as big a variance because it would have only been a foot or 2 instead of
Right.
8 feet.
Right, and they could have probably gone
So,
length.
but
Right, so-
I don't think that we
So
should
you're
be-
shooting down my, why so long of 40 years of waiting to ask for this?
I'm not sure, I'm not
Barry,
sure.
the deck is there. I look at it as the deck is there, they're just finishing it off.
But we're aggravating.
Maybe we are. I mean, if you look at the back of the house, no offense, but it ain't very pretty.
I would agree. I mean, we're not allowed to discuss color
I mean,
or
it's an
style. But I
improvement,
agree. I
but
mean,
it's an improvement.
I saw the pictures of the deck and I'm like, man, that deck's got to go. I mean, it looks like it's 30 years old. So I'm going to ask, can I get a motion?
I would make a motion to approve the variance based on the condition that a acceptable to city screening be placed between number 6, is it 6 St. Michael's, and the property line.
Did
Okay,
you
so-
mean screening, or do you mean?
Well, I mean
you
by screening, a fence or something
No,
to
so-
block the view.
So, if I could, before we get a second on that, a condition like that is not impossible to impose, but it is very much, we should endeavor to avoid that, because here's what can happen. A tree gets planted, it's satisfying to the applicant, it's satisfying to the city, it's not satisfying to somebody else, or the tree dies, or the tree was there and the tree is now gone, but the porch is there. It creates an enforcement issue for Matt and his people. When is a tree a tree? Does it have to be evergreen? I mean, when is it a screen and when is it something else?
Convinced me. I will withdraw my,
Okay.
my motion.
Well, I'm not saying,
I
that-
understand what you're saying.
Right. It would be nice, but we're not making,
and,
I was gonna
and you do
say-
see them in commercial applications where you're applying the commercial code and and the buffer requirements and the planting requirements, which are very specific. But to say, just put a tree in, we've got to be really specific, or Mr. Janis
Maybe he'll
is not,
voluntarily.
Mr. Janis won't be able to enforce it. I think the applicant has already indicated that he's willing to plant a tree, or willing to plant some kind of a screen, but I don't know how we can specifically define that without referring to a code requirement that won't work in this
Mark, would you like to restate?
I already said, you make good points, Fred. I make a motion to approve the applicant's application based on meeting the 4 quick check criteria.
Okay, I need a second.
I'll second it.
Okay, now we're going to go through and vote on this for or against the motion and your reasons for or against. Mark?
I'm for, based on the fact that I believe they've met all 4 of the quick check factors.
Can you elaborate any?
Well, the first 2 we talked about. I don't believe that it has a substantial ill effect on the neighborhood. I think that it might have an improvement on the neighborhood, actually. And I do think that by not approving it, there is a substantial downgrade in the quality of life to the owners, to Mr. Schulman.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Edie?
I'm going to support the motion as well. The first 2 quick check criteria are handled without even thinking about them, really, although we have to think about everything, and we do. I appreciate the fact that of the citizens who spoke to us today about the number 3, the seriously affecting the neighboring properties. And I reiterate the fact that each case that we look at is distinct from every other case. We do not do precedents. We take each thing separately. I believe there was some misunderstanding with some of the neighbors who perhaps gave us information, but in the end, I appreciate the fact that they were willing to come and spend their time speaking to us today. But I don't think that there's an overriding problem with the neighborhood properties. And if there were another case of even slightly similar situations, we would start totally fresh and listen to that at another time. And criteria 4, of course, the exceptional practical difficulty. I think the whole two properties on one, 2 owners on one property, and everything that we have discussed about the setbacks does not cause me to feel that the owner can do anything else other than what he's done, which is to take the very smallest footprint to stay within all of the other zoning criteria that he can, and to build his porch.
Thank you. Jan?
I also support the motion for the reasons that Edie said, and I will only add that, as all of us get older, we make changes in our life. And sometimes when we didn't need a screen porch, maybe we do.
Thank you. Bill?
I'll support. I think it's a very close call. I think that on factor 3, I agree with Edie, actually, that the existence of the second floor deck basically says you're not really making much of an encroachment, on my point, on the existence of living space or raised space in the setback. It's already there. I think that sort of, to me, also answers question 4, which is that they don't really have any other option in terms of being able to have outdoor space. I think it's a very close call. I think that the neighbors who raised good questions, and so I'm prepared to support it. But I do agree that it was a close call.
I agree that it's a close call. Quick check items number 1 and 2 were easily met. 3 and 4 were where I got hung up, and I am going to vote against the variance approval, strictly because I do not see an exceptional practical difficulty after, all the, even with the, all these years. And I do think there is an impact to the neighbors being so close due to nothing from Mr. Schulman. So with that, the variance is approved 4-1. Thank you. And thank you, everyone. And let's take a real quick break. Thank you, thank you. not want to keep everyone here till, one night we were here till what, 9:30? And
9
yeah,
o'clock.
we started asking Ann for pizza.
We may
you
be
know?
here again.
Oh, we're never doing that
We're-
again. Remember that.
No.
We're going to beat that record?
Okay, case number 2, 52 and 54 Kent Street. As I explained in the first case, the board must understand the exceptional practical difficulties that we will take into consideration during our deliberation and voting. I don't need to repeat all that, I don't think, unless you would like me to. So we will move first to the building inspector's report.
Thank you, Chair. Continuing on this evening, case number 102310. The location is 54 Kent Street. The applicant for this application is Charles and Jane Andrea. I hope that's... Thank you. Address is 4455 Fairview Drive in Huntington, Maryland, 20639. The owners are the same. Applicant seeks relief from the following: 27026 side yards A, 2 side yards, and I remove the rest of it, which is described later. The nature of the request is as follows. The applicants are seeking a variance to 27026 side yards A. 2 side yards shall be provided on every lot as described in the following table. The table is included in the variance requested section. To allow the separation of an existing parcel into 2 parcels. Parcel lines are proposed to be reestablished that were originally plotted within within the Rehoboth Camp Meeting Association. The property is located at 54 Kent Street, Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, 19971, and is situated in the R1 Residential District. The property is listed in Sussex County records as tax map number 334-14.17-43.00. The property is a rectangular-shaped parcel, and the submitted survey included with the application shows the property to contain 8,400 square feet. Background information. The applicant wishes to partition an existing 100-foot by 84-foot parcel into 2 separate parcels. There are currently several structures that are proposed to be removed to bring the main dwelling unit into better compliance with the required side yard areas. Proposed for removal are an existing deck and screen porch that are attached to the east side of the main dwelling unit. The variances requested are as follows. The applicant is seeking relief from the following code provisions: 27026 side yards. 2 side yards shall be provided on every lot as prescribed in the following table. Again, removed the majority of the table to reflect only what's required here. This district is an R1. The minimum side yard, the minimum width of each side yard is 6 feet, with a total minimum aggregate of 16 feet. When the existing deck and screen porch are removed from the main dwelling unit, the structure is shown to remain 0.4 feet over the required setback at the northeast corner and 0.2 feet over on the southeast corner. Conclusion is that the proposed lot partitioning would create encroachments over a new lot line to be reestablished. Even with the removal of existing attached structures to the main dwelling unit, the structure would still be located within the required side yard setback. For the applicant to seek the partitioning request before the Planning Commission, a variance is required to allow the encroachment.
Question for Matt.
Yeah, we'll do the same thing. We'll do our questions for the building inspector first.
Okay. So if the encroachments are removed, how much setback would there be on either side? That doesn't, you don't say that. You're probably better at math than I am, so 4/10 of a foot and I'd rather just, you just
It's
tell me.
4.8 inches.
I understand the inches, but what does that leave?
Actually, it's 4.8 feet.
Oh, it's feet.
Right.
No, inches. 0.4 of a foot is 4.8 inches.
You guys are talking about 2 different things.
I want to know what the setback is going to be.
Thank you. The setback will, as proposed, the setback for the created partition line would be 8.1 feet. Existing is 7.9 feet. Well, excuse me, that 8.1 foot is what the is what the proposed line would be if created. It would be 0.4 feet, which is,
You're missing, on the west side of the house, it's existing house on Cookman Street, what is the setback between the house and the property line on the west side?
Do you mean the distance?
The distance, is it 6 feet, is it 8 feet, is it 10 feet, is it,
I
you
can
know?
answer it if it helps. So I'll just give both. On the west side, it's 7.9. That will be unchanged. On the
Okay.
east side, the required setback is 8.1 feet, and we're asking for a 0.4 foot variance, so it'd be 7.7
7.
feet on the east side.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So both
That's
both
what I was
exceed
trying to
6
figure
feet
out.
on either side. We just don't meet the 16-foot aggregate.
6.4 from whatever that little bump out is.
Yeah, that's the chimney, but we
Chimney,
we
okay.
get 24 inches on a chimney.
Okay, I got it, thanks a lot. Thank you, Matt.
Matt, is there a provision made for additional parking to be put on to the lot 54 when it's removed from?
So, yes, that was a question that I reached back to the applicant, and if you look at the survey that was included in my report, it shows some proposed parking to be located within the front lot area.
In front of the house?
Yeah,
Correct.
there's a dashed line, you can see it.
So, and
okay.
I will tell you, I drew that in because Matt and I were going back and forth quickly on that. It's not a survey drawing. There is one change. We think we can get that in without affecting the significant trees in the front. That's why it's being placed where it is, so that it would sort of be in between two significant trees.
Where
So
is
it's
that
that
again,
square
please?
box there?
Yeah, the square box.
Right,
Lower.
that's what I thought, that's what
Oh,
you
I
meant.
see.
Okay, I got it.
Yep.
I got
We
it.
didn't get one of those
No, we
drawings.
didn't.
No, I
We
didn't get one of
We
those.
did not get that.
That's embedded in the documents for today's meeting.
Recently embedded?
I printed
Yeah,
out
because
everything.
I don't think so.
I printed out everything. It wasn't
We do not
there.
We do not have that, but
No, it was
there
not.
is a very
No, here, it's
ghosted
on there
dash
now.
line. I do see it,
I do
Vince.
see it now.
Yeah, and that might be actually the setback line. So I will tell you, Matt and I had some back and forth on that, because my comment to him was that we'll have to comply with the parking and we'll have to deal with that when we get the lot separation. But to his credit, he said, well, sort of seeing forward, he knew there was going to be a question about that. Turns out there was. And so he asked, I just knew we weren't going to be able to get a survey done, so he asked us to sort of conceptually show where it would be. And also, he had a question just to make sure we're good on lot coverage and everything else, and we're way under lot coverage.
Well, that saves the question I was going to ask Fred, because when we had to deal with this issue before, you said we're not here to deal with partitioning. So I didn't have to ask Fred, so thank you, Matt.
You're welcome.
Okay, I have
Finished?
more.
I'm finished. That's it,
Okay,
yeah.
do you have questions?
I do for Matt. Did you want to go ahead, or should I?
I'll
Go
start.
ahead.
I'll
You go
start.
ahead.
All right. Matt, with lots 52 and 54, what makes the owners need to go to the planning commission to seek a new lot? Since they are already designated as two lots,
They're not,
They're not, they're
Well-
54.
lot 52 and 54, right?
but they've been treated as the same.
Certainly.
I want to know what makes it. Is it the fence? Is it the deck? Is it what makes the applicants have to go to the planning commission?
Certainly, thank you. That's a great question. Recently, rules have been changed with the Planning Commission. Administrative partitionings and mergers have gone away. So all mergers and lot partitionings now need to go before the Planning Commission for approval.
And what makes them joined together? Is it the deck straddling the property line? Is it the fence straddling?
So they are plotted as separate lots,
Correct, that's what I'm getting
but
at.
they've been merged into a single parcel.
Okay, and if they,
By use, wasn't it?
So the county treats them as a single parcel, the city treats them as a single parcel, and there are structures that straddle the boundary line, which would, create an issue and would require.
what I was getting, thank you, Fred, what I was getting at is if they came along and did the demolition, took down the fence, took down the deck, which you would approve, they still have to go to the planning
They
commission.
still have to go to the
That's what I want-
Planning
okay.
Commission. So let me give a little clarity if I may.
Yeah.
Excuse me. In the past, when Rehoboth said you could build over the property line and we will not recognize those as merged parcels. We will continue to recognize those as two separate parcels.
Okay.
The county, when you would submit to them, they would automatically merge the properties together and create one parcel. That has created confusion in our records, and we've noticed that with the last CDP acceptance and discussion. Okay. In an effort to clarify that, we have gotten rid of administrative partitionings and mergers, and so that to clear the process up, to make sure that everything gets recorded correctly, we've gone and basically everything needs to go before the Planning Commission when involved with partitionings, mergers, lot uses, et cetera.
Thank you.
That's how it used to be.
Yeah.
And then it went back for the
Right.
administrative.
That's
Not
all,
just going
that's all I
back.
had
Is
for.
that why your report, the property is located at 54 Kent Street? So right now, it's known as 54 Kent Street.
Correct. Because there's a dwelling on that.
On that, on that side, right?
Correct.
Right. Okay.
Over to you, Edie.
Were you finished?
Yep, I'm
Oh,
done.
okay, great. First question, is this an unusual request for an 8,400-foot lot to be divided into two 4,200-feet lots?
No, again, it's returning back to kind of its original deeded way, so it's not unusual.
Okay. Are there a lot of 50 by 84-foot lots? I mean, is that area is, or are there places around Rehoboth that have a grouping of 50 by 84s?
So that's a great question. In that area is generally some lots that are 50 by 84, Kent Street, Sussex. In that kind of triangle, if you look at our parcel map, at our zoning map, in that triangular area, there are lots and parcels that do not meet that 5,000 square footage requirement.
Okay. How did they come about? Was that just the original deeding or division?
Gonna have to ask William Penn.
Okay, all right.
Vince will probably speak to that as well.
Yes, and as time has gone by, how has this smaller size been handled? What's different than a 50 by 100? If we have a 50 by 100 in R1 and this smaller lot, we have the same setbacks, front yards, side yards, backs, and everything, but is there anything that's different in the way that they're handled just in general because these do exist?
That's a great question. No, first and foremost. So all of the zoning requirements still come into play, and they are still as if this was a 5,000 square foot
I see.
parcel. Lot coverage, floor area ratio, they all are relative to your lot size.
And the 2 parking spaces and all of the things that
All the
need to be-
requirements.
My next question was, what about regulations for parking and driveway? But that was answered before we started here. And all other measurements are handled by zoning for R1.
Correct.
Okay. And I'm verifying, and I think we've done that too, that 0.2 of a foot is 2.4 inches, and 0.4 of a foot is 4.8 inches. So we're making sure we're talking about feet and inches are
Yes.
correct.
So
Okay.
where the disconnect is, and obviously in construction plans, when it comes to the architectural side, they are in feet and inches.
Right.
When it comes to engineering, they're always in feet.
Feet, right. That's all that I have for you, Matt.
Mark, do you have anything additional? Bill? No. Okay. All right. Over to you, Vince.
Vince Robertson, for the record, with Parkowski, Girk, and Swayze. I'm here with Chip and Jane Andrea, owners of the property. Andre, sorry, I already screwed it up right out of the jump. Hopefully, this will be less complicated than the last one. And I have to say it's the direct opposite because we're actually removing a deck and we're removing a screen porch to make this work. So if you can take what we talked about a moment ago and turn it around on its head, that's what we're dealing with today. They do own lots 52 and 54 on Kent Street. To add to what Matt referenced, it's handled differently by the county and by the city. Actually, the city actually sends out duplicate notifications for everything. Like we all got, that rental notice that you get in the mail that says we're going to rent your property. Well, they got one for 52 and they got one for 54. So in the city's mind, it is two properties, and I mean, there's other information that they received as well. It's referenced that way in the deed, and of course, it's referenced when those lots on Kent Street were laid out. They actually purchased the property in 1988. When you look at their deed, it appears that they're actually the second owner of it. The first deed from the commissioners of Rehoboth Beach in 1926 was to Mary Pyle, and she's the lady that sold it to them in 1988. They have owned it and renovated and used it as theirs for more than 35 years. The home, as we talked about, that is the home. If you drive by on Kent Street today, that's what you see with the fence. The home sits on the west side of the lot, and the yard, which is vacant, is on the east side. Just for frame of reference, this is looking at the eastern side of the home, and that's the screen porch that will be removed to eliminate the zoning encroachment that merges these two lots. There's actually a deck that's on the, I guess if you look at my cursor, it doesn't show up in this picture, but back over here on the property. But so that sort of gives you an orientation to that side of the house that we're dealing with. That's the chimney that we talked about. Again, that's just sort of the neighborhood, and to the point of that discussion a moment ago, and it sort of jumps ahead a little bit, the character of that neighborhood are these smaller 50 by 84-ish lots on both Kent and Sussex Street. For whatever reason, that's the way that section of Rehoboth Beach was laid out in the early part of the last century, I guess, at this point. But this one is actually sort of the outlier in that, aside from the one that's two doors down, it is really the largest lot at this point on Kent Street. I do want to, just to discuss the age of it, and everything that's in this PowerPoint is either in your, it was in Matt's record, we have that one that I drew on, or there are pictures that are in the public domain. If you went down Kent Street, you'd see the houses I'm talking about. But to give you an idea of the age of the home, one of the things that I found in the county's records, which is fascinating for a couple different reasons, this woman who owned it, Mary Pyle, sounds like she would be a hoot to know today. She wrote a letter in 1977 discussing the county's assessment of the property. And she says that you say that your property records indicate that said property has a value of $47,700. She says, my little cottage is, it's hard to read. My little cottage is very old. It was the first building for any purposes erected there or nearby. It faced only a dust street and sidewalk. No capital improvements had been made to it at the time. And she goes on to say, consequently, I shall be very grateful if you will please let me know promptly using the enclosed return envelope upon what basis and upon whose imagination you considered the value of $47,700. And actually, the end is great too. It says a substantial reduction in your amount would make it unnecessary for me to come to Georgetown. Otherwise, I may ask for an audience. So, it's just one of those great letters that you come across sometimes, and these sorts of things. And most of that's not relevant to why we're here today, but it's just a great letter. I just wanted to read that. But it does show that the cottage is very old, even in 1977.
Vince, give that to the Historical Society, please.
Yeah, well, it's in the county's records. I'll make sure they have a copy of it, because I will. I'll send them this slide. So anyhow, the porch and the deck, as I mentioned, on the left side of the home or the east side will be removed, which eliminates that substantial encroachment. Going back to the survey. The shed over here will also be removed because that would eventually, it would become an accessory structure that's not accessory to anything, which we can't have. So everything would be in compliance with the code except for the variance we need for that 0.2 of a foot to 0.4 of a foot on that east side, which, as was noted in my letter and I think in the legal notice, that equates to less than 12.88 square feet running down that one side of the house. I was going to suggest that this was similar to a similar application, but in hearing Ms. Harmon's comments earlier, I'm certainly not going to do that, so we'll go right to the variance standards. The nature of the zone where the property lies, it's R1 residential. Dwellings are permitted in this district, so that one of all four of them is the easiest to satisfy. The next one is whether the variance is consistent with the character of the neighborhood. I think from Ms. Pyle's letter, it's safe to say that this house established the character of Kent Street. It was the first one there, she said, back when Kent Street was a dust street. They're all smaller lots with small homes built right to or over the setbacks. Just to give you some examples, and these were literally within half a block of the Andres home. The one on the left is 46 Kent Street, and I didn't go measure it, but just in terms of visually looking at it, the property corner is the corner of this fence. That's a short setback, and that's actually a fairly large home on that street. The one on the right is 39 Kent Street, and that property is, a home maybe built in the 60s or 70s. It's right up on the edge of that setback. This is 35 Kent Street, and again, I didn't measure it because I didn't want to trespass on people's property, but from the fence to the side of that house appears to certainly be less than 8 feet and probably less than 6 feet. If I'm 6'3", and if I lied down sideways, my head would be bumping on the side of the house from that fence. So again, that's sort of the character of what we're dealing with. And you can go all up and down Kent Street and Sussex Street for that matter and see homes of various ages, some that predated zoning, some that are, since the zoning's been implemented. But what we're asking to do is consistent with the character of that street and the smaller homes that are shown there. The other thing is, this is a home that's probably 80 to 100 years old based on the deed. Many of these older homes in Rehoboth, as we know, are being demolished. This is one that they would like to preserve. Going back to Ms. Pyle's letter, just sort of, it's one of those that we have a little bit of provenance on because we have a letter that goes back to 1977 from the family who actually built it, which is kind of fascinating. And the city's code, or the city's populace, our comp plan here in Rehoboth Beach wants to preserve those types of homes. The other thing as to the character, which I don't have a picture of, which as I was driving through, I didn't notice the first time, but on Sussex Street, to the rear of the property, I'll just go to it was the Quillens building at one point, and I think it held Epworth Preschool.
It was, it was a preschool.
Yeah, and I was to say, yeah, right.
Yeah, thanks, Walt. I knew
And so that's also sort of the outlier neighborhood-wise, because it's a big concrete block, two-story structure that's, right up to the front yard, side yard, and rear yard setbacks.
it used to be commercially zoned.
Yeah, and Ms. Constantine, I didn't go to look to see if it is commercially
No,
zoned.
it's not anymore.
Yeah,
because
I
when
wasn't sure.
Marion somebody was mayor, she had that block of Sussex, which
Yeah.
had the only commercial on it, changed from commercial to residential.
Yeah. And that's what my recollection was looking at the zoning maps. Thanks for clarifying that. But it's still the character of that neighborhood. So, in their backyard, they're a small house next to a big block, sort of barracks of a building at this point. Because looks like it was designed to be functional, not attractive, at the time it was built. So as I mentioned, with regard to the character of the neighborhood and what we've seen from Ms. Pyle's letter and also up and down Kent Street, really, this home is the character of the neighborhood, and that would be lost if the variance isn't granted and the home had to be, or ultimately was demolished. Which leads me to the third item under quick check, which is the serious effects on neighboring properties. I'm going to sort of flip this one around. Mr. and Mrs. Andre, they want to be able to preserve the home and also preserve separately this lot on the east side. That lot represents a substantial investment to them. I don't know what they're going to do in terms of selling it now or in the future or whatever, but if we can't get this variance to maintain this house on this side, that means that we can't return these to two lots. And the economics of that are that the character of the neighborhood would be substantially altered if the variance wasn't granted, because economically it makes no sense for somebody to buy an 8,400 square foot lot and keep this small 1.5-story dwelling on it. They would tear it down. I mean, honestly, it would get torn down, and there would be a house that's much bigger built across both of those lots that would have potentially 6 feet of variance next to lot 50 and 9 feet next to lot 56 with probably 8 bedrooms and however many bathrooms and whatever you could fit on there. This way, we're able to preserve, I don't think anybody wants to see that. This way, we're able to preserve this 80 to 100-year-old home, have another house that's on Lot 52 that complies in all respects with the front, side, and rear yard setbacks and the parking that's appropriately sized for Kent and Sussex streets. So, that's sort of the effect on the neighboring property. On the one hand, we get to keep this one-story frame dwelling that's been there for decades if the variance is granted, which is the character of the neighborhood. If it's denied, the character of the neighborhood and the properties would be, I think, adversely affected. The other thing is, this variance is on an internal lot line, so it will be what we said, 7.7 inches off, or excuse me, sorry, Matt, feet off that new property line. That's going to be an internal property line, so it's only going to affect the Andres house and the Andres lot, and at some point, whoever may buy the Andres lot. That's not going to have any impact on Lot 50. It's not going to have any impact on Lot 53 or 55 Sussex Street, or certainly not Lot 56 on Kent Street. And as I said, that whatever gets built at some point, whenever that might happen, it will have to comply with the tree ordinances and with all the setbacks on Lot 52. At the same time, 0.2 feet and 0.4 feet, or 2.4 inches and 4.8 inches running down the side of that property is not visible to the naked eye. If you're driving down Kent Street or walking down Kent Street, there's no way that you'd be able to distinguish that from some of these examples that I showed. It's 12.88 square feet running along that 32-foot side of the house, which is minor and, as I said, not noticeable. There was an objection letter, and it sort of, I think, touches on the character of the neighborhood, concerns about parking. As I mentioned, we will comply, we have to, with all the off-street parking requirements, just like all the other homes on Kent Street and Sussex Street have to do. This is a small house, so it's, I think it's 4 bedrooms and 2 baths, with 2 of the bedrooms upstairs under the eave of the cottage. So it's not something where it's a large rental that drives a whole lot of parking that we see from other homes in Rehoboth Beach. I guess, again, flipping it on its side, if the variance wasn't granted and a large home was built there that wouldn't have any setbacks in the middle. So in other words, you could be 9 feet off that side, 6 feet off that side, and have a home subject to the FAR. And I think the large lot requirement for setbacks might kick in, so they might be a little larger on the setbacks. But you could have a house that straddles this entire rectangle in the middle, which would drive a lot of parking, that would need more than 2 parking spaces. Here, we're going to have a lot that complies in all respects except for this one small variance on the side with 2 off-street parking spaces, and then another lot that will comply with all the setback requirements with its required 2 parking spaces. And then the fourth item is the applicants are faced with exceptional practical difficulties. As I mentioned, the city's comprehensive plan and newspaper articles and discussions all around town strive to find ways to preserve these older homes in Rehoboth Beach. There's an outcry over demolition in Rehoboth Beach. Every year in the Cape Gazette, they post that article that lists all the demolition permits all over town that everybody sort of follows with interest and laments the loss of these older homes. A denial of this variance will result in the home having to be demolished at some point. And I guess, again, flipping that on its side, the alternative would be, I guess theoretically, but not practically, shaving off about 1/2 foot down that east side of the house, which is structurally impossible. I mean, at that point, to redo that and the plumbing, the electric, and the structural components of it, the decision would be weighed and balanced in favor of just tearing the whole house down. Again, so demolition of the home is a drastic outcome when balanced with the minimal variance that's being sought. I was going to say this afternoon, but this evening. And the last point that's not really part of Quick Check, but is always sort of considered, and I think you all considered it on the last one, is this the least intensive variance, or is it minimal? However you want to quantify that. And again, we talked about 2.4 inches or 4.8 inches, which nobody would be able to see, or 12.88 square feet. That's as small as you can get I think, I mean, I guess you could go down to an inch, and I don't know that a surveyor couldn't just, finagle that so we wouldn't need a variance. But it's a minor one when you balance that with maintaining this 100-year-old home in Rehoboth Beach. So with that, what I'd like to do is call Chip up just so he can be sworn in if he has anything to add, but also confirm what I stated, since I know my testimony is not,
Like
my
you said?
explanation
You
is
want
not.
No, wait, up here.
Yeah. So, Mr. Andre, you have, first, if you could be sworn in by Mr. Townsend.
So it's just name and address, and I'm anxious to hear your pronunciation of
Sure.
the last.
I generally say Charles Andre, but anything is good. But Charles Andre, 4455 Fairview Drive, Huntingtown, Maryland.
Sir, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
So, Mr. Andre, if you've heard everything I've stated this evening, if you would affirm, or can you confirm that what I stated is true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
I can affirm that.
Okay. Is there anything that you would like to add to the board this evening?
No, I think it's just, my wife and I are 68 and making, as we're talking earlier in a bit different context, making different decisions. We have a decision that we'd like to free up, or at least the potential for some assets as we get to this age. But we love the house and want to maintain that as best we can. We did not know that we'd be 4 inches or 2.5 off, and this would make us get to know Vince in a different way, so which is great fun. But we appreciate what you do and your responsibilities on this, and I'm happy to respond to any questions.
Well, I would say that concludes our testimony, except for questions. One note I put in here, and I know, that Mr. Perlstein sort of brought this up. If Ms. Pyle had just shifted the house a little bit 8 years ago, we'd all be eating dinner right now. So.
True, but maybe not true, because are you not removing the porch and the deck?
Yeah.
You're
Yes.
removing 50% of the charm.
Yeah.
So what you have left is
block.
a block without a porch, without any outdoor living. What's left maybe should be torn down.
Yeah, well, we're going to try and save it. If you go in the house, it looks like a cottage from the pine woods, and it literally is all pine interior.
Yeah, I bet.
I mean, the tough part about the house is if a match goes wrong, that house is gone in 15 minutes. So but we've kept it alive for 35 years. Mary Pyle was quite an incredible person, and we have protected that for this period of time.
It is a cute house as it is with the porch, but I think
Yeah.
the porch is a balance to it.
Yeah.
And with the parking going right out in front, how attractive is that going to be?
Well, I mean, we've made the determination, not for that reason, but that we have the clams or oyster shell surface down there. It's not green, but it's not unsightly. If we're allowed to do that, we would probably just replicate it on the other side as well, so.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
I'm done.
And I would
Thank
just,
you.
if I could,
More comments.
on that, I mean, so there is still plenty of room and plenty of lot coverage and plenty of FAR to put decks on the back of the house for their
Well,
outdoor
that
living
was,
space.
that was my next comment, I guess, is that I agree that so many people in our family, we have 4 kids, have used this for all this time. In fact, we bought the house when our daughter was 35 years ago in my wife, so they've all enjoyed it all these years. But we really are trying to make a determination that tries to protect it. And so we may have to just move the porch around. It won't be the same. And in fact, they're Henlopen Hotel, right, Jane? Tiles that she stole or got somehow, so,
Yeah, they were auctioned off,
I think,
Avenue.
so.
Confirm for
Mark
us,
has another
someone had mentioned, I
Sure.
just want to confirm or not confirm, the property is for sale or has been for sale for some time?
It has been. We've been looking at different options on it, but we've decided we want to keep the old house as long as possible, as we can. And we have neighbors that are good friends, and we've been back and forth that have a different view on this subject tonight. For all of us, we don't want this to change, and if I had made a few more $1 million, maybe I would have just kept the little house and the bigger lot. But that's just not in our bailiwick at this moment.
Thank you, Mr. Andre.
My question is, if this is the way I think I understand it, if we approve your variance, you're removing the deck and the porch as they exist today.
Correct,
You're adding 2 parking spaces.
correct.
Now, what are you doing about the beautiful trees?
Oh, my God, that was my
Yeah.
question.
Oh, my
We-
gosh.
We want to, I don't even want to joke.
No, it's
We-
not a
We
joke.
want to protect them
It's
as
not a
best we
joke
can.
question.
In fact, we've been working, the two of us, thinking through, how do we get the parking area between 2 trees, one that's a very beautiful tree that we will ultimately always protect, and another smaller tree. But our goal is to protect the trees as much as possible.
Vince, could you go back to the original slide that you had that showed most of Lot 54 and a little bit of 52? Yeah.
That one, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, there are an uncountable number of gorgeous trees there.
right,
That will be in the empty lot, that people will have to cut down to build a house.
yeah.
And there are some in their lot too, or in the 54 lot, but
Perhaps even where the parking is going to go might
That's
require
right.
that tree to go.
Our goal is the large tree to the right that you see would be to maintain that tree. We're not, the good news is, I don't think the requirements are for me to put 6 inches of asphalt down to create a parking space.
Absolutely not.
So if.
You can have pervious.
Yeah.
yeah. that's
So,
better.
so our preference would be to just merely outline a space that complies with your requirements of the 9 or 18 by 18, I think it is, and do that with just the oyster shells.
And the other thing I would point out, because I share that concern, and Rehoboth's unique, with having the trees that we have compared to so many other beach towns. But so in addition to the ones that they're keeping over here, that photograph's somewhat misleading because by chance or by planning or whatever, a lot of the trees that are on lot 52 are on the perimeter. So what you see, there's an 18 and a 14 and a 27-inch tree that's out front that shouldn't be touched by, new construction, which I think is a good thing. This 34-inch tree probably could be worked around potentially just because with lot coverage, you could save that. It looks like a 32-inch tree back here and a 30-inch tree back here. Those, again, are all outside of the setbacks, and then, this 30-inch one. So,
That's a good point.
one I hadn't really thought about until Ms. Herron brought it up. They're going to have to comply. Whatever happens on that lot is going to have to comply with the tree ordinance. But this picture is somewhat deceiving because the trees that you do see, you kind of see it, are right behind that fence line, a lot of them. So they would be safe.
That's true. Unfortunately, the trees which we wanted to grow up higher were at the back of our lot to shade us from the Quillens place, but they never grew very much because we had too much shade, but that's our goal.
Those are all of my questions right now.
Okay.
If somebody else has
All
questions.
right, yeah, I have
Someone else
questions.
has.
Did you add the porch?
No, that was original.
was
when
original,
we purchased
okay.
it 35 years ago.
Okay, and do I understand you do not live full-time in that property on lot 54?
We, at this property in 54 Kent, we've spent the last several years half of the year here. So we
Okay.
are legal
Ha-
residents at
Okay,
54
half-time,
Kent.
okay. Are you intending, if this variance is approved, to build the home on lot 52?
No, that is not our
Okay,
intention. We don't have plans yet for that, let's put it that way.
okay. Okay, they were my questions. They were my questions, thank you.
Now, I just, I walk by that house. I used to live on Sussex. Now we live on Oak. But I walk by that as part of my walk, probably 3 or 4 days a week. And that's Lisa and my, one of our favorite houses. And I mean, she texted me today and said, what are they going to do with all the trees, And that's, and Edie already, so, yeah, that's all I have
wanna-
to say.
Bill, jump. Did you investigate, as crazy as it sounds, picking up and moving the house?
It's not crazy, I've looked at that, and
Okay.
I haven't ruled that out, even at some point, if we make a judgment that we can't keep it, and the variance is not approved, is there an area where we could move it? It's all wood structure.
I mean, stay on the same lot, just move it.
Yeah.
Just keep it where it's at.
Oh, and moving it 4 inches?
Move it. I know it sounds
Yeah,
crazy, that's
no.
why I said it sounds crazy.
We did not financially make
Yeah.
that decision. Yeah.
Okay, all
But
right.
we're looking for all sorts of
Okay,
solutions.
thank you.
I just want to clarify, and this really a question for Fred. All we are being asked to do is to say that if the planning commission approves a partition, the existing house will be deemed to be in compliance, notwithstanding the fact that it's short 4 inches from the 16-foot cumulative setback, correct?
We take a non-conforming,
Why they need a variance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's fair. As we heard from, I think, the prior case, and as we're going to possibly be confronted with in the future, is that certain matters that involve the planning commission's action are not going to be initiated until after.
After the variance.
Because where I was going is that where the issue on parking or trees or anything else, our granting of the side setback variance doesn't address that at all.
Right.
So that I assume the planning commission would address the question about if we allow the partition, what do you do about parking? I just want to make it clear in my own mind and on the record what it is we are doing and what questions we are not addressing ourselves if we were in addressing and potentially granting the variance.
That's right. I mean, you may hear arguments which, for that reason, you respectfully hear, but they don't enter into your process for determining whether this is a meritorious application.
Yes, because I was thinking of that. A number of the objections have to do with flooding on Kent Street and parking on Kent Street. That didn't seem to me to be pertinent to the quick check factors on this application
Right.
being the side setback issues.
That's right.
Okay.
Relating just to this existing structure, and actually a good, certain portion of it or component of it will be removed, so there'll be less.
So in other words, it's the same thing that happened on Park. We had issues about the
40
building-
Park.
40 Park. We had issues about the building in the back, but what we said, we were told is we're not addressing partitioning. We're only addressing the variance that was asked for on Park.
Yeah, the planning commission has made us the threshold, right?
I
The
know that.
threshold,
I
which
know
is
that.
cleaner.
Yeah, it means when the planning commission then considers it, the fact that it's over by 4/10 of a foot.
And it's okay if we would have.
If the variance is granted, then that becomes a non-issue. But the question on parking or number of parking slots. Trees and all that is not in front of us, as I understand it.
No relief from those requirements is being requested
Right.
by the staff.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
For instance, items like the density, we know that if we approve this, the density is going to get higher. Doesn't that affect the neighborhood? Aren't the consequences down the line something that we should consider today?
One of the things you heard was that there's the potential that if this application is denied, that there'll be another mechanism for building two structures there. It's just that the existing one won't remain.
So the question is, though, are those two structures, because we have less than standard size lots, so the FAR will require those two structures to be smaller. They'll both need to have adequate parking, and might that be actually preferable over saving this one that's, after it's all sort of butchered up, isn't going to look so great?
Maybe maybe Vince would like to speak to
So
that.
I would respond to that in a simple way, that the density there, the appropriate density, was already established when the lots for Kent and Sussex Street were laid out 100 or so years ago. They established Lot 52 and they established Lot 54. So, just like 50, 48, 46, all the way on down. And I really, as I think somebody just pointed out, I think that's a non-issue, because without coming to a single commission or board, could tear the house down now, get it returned to 52 and 54. Well, I say that we'd have to go to the planning commission now, because they changed that. Before it was over the counter. And have two lots and build two conforming houses there that don't have the character of a 100-year-old home.
We cannot control that.
Yeah,
Right.
right. And I will, just on the partition, this is one of the things that, so it used to be, as Ms. Conacy said, we had to go to the planning commission for everything. And then it was an administrative approval if you were going back to the way it was originally plotted. Now in, I think, August or November or September, they changed the code so that you have to go to at least one meeting. You know, and it's, I always struggled with that, whether you were establishing two completely new lots that didn't ever exist, you know, a true subdivision versus returning something to how it was originally plotted. To me, I never really, I mean, we always go through the process, but I never really considered that to be a partition, because you're not creating something new. You know, it's already partitioned, or it is already subdivided 100 years ago. So roundabout way saying, I think that density issue was already answered in the 1910s and 20s, probably.
Other questions? Okay, we're going to open up, before we open up the public, who took that photograph? That makes Kent Street look gigantic.
So, yeah, I did, and I realized to get it to fit this, in full disclosure, to get it fit the screen, it distorted it. Yeah, it looks like a boulevard,
Okay.
doesn't it? Oh,
That a
sorry,
fisheye lens.
Yeah. All right. Is there anyone here who wishes, thank you,
in
wishes
favor.
to speak in support of the variance? Okay, with none? Okay. Those who wish to speak against, please come up and we'll swear you in.
Yes, please excuse my mask, but I have a infection on my face. So that's why it's
Your-
like this.
No need to.
Anyway, my name is Jennifer Duncan. Can you hear me?
Ken,
I
yes.
live at 68 Kent Street. I have owned, my
And
husband and
Ms.
I.
Duncan, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
We have owned on Kent Street, not the skinny side, but the two-way side, since 1992, and prior to that in Rehoboth since 1984. My first question is, have you all looked at the records of the denial of the separation of these lots that was presented by Mary Pyle in 1988? You all denied it. I don't know which committee, but apparently.
No,
it's
if
not-
it's not,
it's not
if
part
it's
of our
not
record.
evidence, so the answer to that is no.
You can't find it. Okay.
We don't know it
It's-
exists.
It does, that's really not relevant to a variance request under the quick check factors.
Okay.
So, you know, just, you know, we all got to play lawyer here sometimes.
Now,
So
I'm not,
we look at the applicant and the quick check factors, which is set by the Delaware Supreme Court. That's what we look at.
okay, I don't want to, I
so
don't
if
want to
other-
repeat what I already sent you all in my email. Maybe a couple other things before I go, because I'm not really feeling well, is this is one lot. Not all lots on that side of Kent Street are 84 by 50. There's one that's 75 by 50. The yellow house at the end is even bigger. So it's kind of a mishmash. And this particular property being discussed tonight was one lot, one property. And if you decide to allow for a variance, then what does that mean for the other properties, not only on Kent, but on Sussex and on my side of Kent? I understand the interests and concerns of the owners, and it's outside of your decision-making here.
Right.
You know, properties go for a lot of money now. 1 million, 2 million, 3 million. And on their particular property, there are an enormous amount of trees, beautiful pine trees. We're a tree city. If you really want to buy that, divide it, then you got to take down a lot of trees. There's no guarantee if it's divided that they, and wouldn't blame them, decide to mow down their existing house. In our position, when we bought in 1992 on the other end of Kent, we wanted to renovate our house. We had 7-foot ceilings. The house was built in the 30s. And then we found out over the years, it had different additions, so it had different foundations. The house could not be saved. I don't know if that would happen to theirs, but just things that may be out of your boundary for this meeting and what you are responsible for. But I am vastly opposed to subdividing one lot into two. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay,
And
you
good
did,
night.
you did ask us a question, like what would it mean to others on Kent Street? And so we would hear any case, each with their, on their own merits with the evidence supplied. So just because we do something or don't do something here does not mean the next door neighbor or down the street, gets it. So
Yeah,
it's always,
I get it.
you okay?
I live here.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Hope you feel better. Okay,
There's more.
I only saw one hand raised. Okay, we have another one? Okay, thank you.
My name's Herbert High, or Herb, from 50 Kent Street here in Rehoboth.
Sir, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
I didn't think about that.
I almost said
Cross off
more
one of
than
the
before, but I want to thank you all for taking your time and being here and doing the work that you're doing in an effort to preserve Rehoboth for what it is. My family and neighbors, are neighbors and friends to the Andreas, and I had to smile when Mr. Robertson's comment that they've owned their property for decades. Well, and we still consider them to be our new neighbor. If decades count, 50 Kent has been my summer home for 70 years. And prior to that, Shaw Park. So, I know the place. And I speak in, yes, and my daughter Shayna is with me today, and she and her brother David hope to make our home a century home. But I speak in opposition to the request, much as what has been said and written to you by Jennifer. And you know the essence of everything that's there. And then trees came up. She wasn't so strong on trees. Other people have really been strong about the number of trees that will be destroyed if there is a separate lot built and a house built there. So, and that's pretty important, along with the whole essence of community, and you used the word charm. I talked to a real estate agent, and he said Rehoboth is losing its charm, and this subdivision could lead to that. And those parking spaces, they represent lost revenue to the city because they take away parking spaces that are now paid for by visitors. So anything parking will take that away. And there's all the increased traffic that we have. The nuts and bolt questions may go to the planner here. And Jennifer referred to Mary Pyle, who I also knew. So, and I know that when she wanted to do, in essence, what they're doing here, she had to apply for a variance or separation, whatever it was, to the city, and it was denied at that time. And so my question is, isn't that denial still in effect today? I could not find a copy of it, but I know very well that it happened. And have to make it somebody's responsibility to determine what that,
But the planning commission would address that
Okay.
when it goes, if this were to be approved, the planning commission would then address that.
okay.
So the Board of Adjustment didn't, in all likelihood, have any role in denying Ms. Pyle's application to subdivide
But I'm
the
saying,
parcels.
okay, but then we could be a little bit cart before the horse then. Because if the planning commission, says it can't happen, then this may not be of any importance.
Unfortunately, the way the process works in the city now is if you need a variance in order to do a partitioning, you have to get your variance first. And then you go to the planning commission. If they went to the planning commission, as Vince well knows, the planning commission would have sent it right back to the Board of Adjustment without granting a variance. So there's a process that we have to go through. I don't know what the process.
And this has only been for the last, 2 years maybe? That this
Well,
flip has happened, 3 years maybe?
I think it's, I was on the planning commission a lot, not in 1988, but in the 90s and 2000s. And so we would frequently, if somebody came for a partitioning and they needed a variance, we would send them to get a variance. And the same thing with some of the hotels. We would send them for their variance first, because you can't partition a lot that's not illegal. You have to have 2 conforming lots to cut them in half, which is why,
Okay, thank you for that. And so the issue then is lots. And quickly, just on density, somebody raised the question of density, and Mr. Robertson said, well, density was established, 100 years ago. Well, 100 years ago, there were no cars. It was a horse and buggy campground at that time. But at this point, it's one lot. The fact that it was 2 lots at one time doesn't alter the fact that in the inspector's report, it's identified as one lot by the county of Sussex. And so what it takes, and I don't know, and again, I couldn't find it, and the questions are before, can you subdivide an 8,400-foot lot?
And again, that's not for this board, so save your questions.
yeah.
Go to that
Well,
hearing.
we are here to address,
Okay. Okay. So those are the
They're
nuts
good
and bolts
questions.
that I'm concerned about. And again, so my other questions are for the planning board. Maintaining all that that Rehoboth is, the plans, say that we want to keep everything that's beautiful, and creating another building permit is going to build another house that the real estate agents agree do not have the charm that this house has. He showed a picture of 46, and he showed it at a rather clever angle. 46, Kent, is a very big White House. And I think some city employees have acknowledged it as being an example, as being the bad example of what is being built in Rehoboth. So, and we don't need a house like that in our community. Hopefully, again, it's not your decision, but the houses that are to be built should be built. And this is the thing for the city, they should be more careful about what houses they're allowing to be built. And so it looks like I'm talking to the wrong people. But again, it is, the one issue there is, like, again, even trees, I'm waiting for a call back from the arborist, to see what role she has and what decision she could make about saving the trees on these both of these properties. The picture shows the trees much better than what the map does. The map kind of diminishes the size of them, but even here, and they're not all in leaf at this point either. So it is a tremendous part, and the people have a tremendous, it's a great house and a great side yard. And so I think it's one lot, regardless of what it was. And so I have to come back to the planning commission.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your concern.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, we're going to close the public portion, public commentary, and we will open it up among the board members to discuss this.
Guess I'll start. My view is that this is a very narrow question, which is, do we believe that under quick check, the applicant has met the 4 criteria for a variance that is as to the 16-foot total side yard setbacks, because it's over 6 feet on both, so we don't have an issue that it's closer than 6 on either side. It's just not a total of 16. It's a few inches short of that. I guess my view is that it does not affect the neighborhood being a total of 4 inches off the total 16-foot total requirement, and that there is an exceptional practical difficulty in terms of making normal improvements. As we said with respect to the last speaker, the Planning Commission will decide whether the applicants have met the requirements for the separation. But if the Planning Commission does do that under the requirements that they set forth, I believe that the applicants, with respect to the application before us, will have shown exceptional practical difficulty in bifurcating from viewing what the options are, either knocking the house down and building another, a new house does not strike me as meeting any of the criteria that we normally would want to see, nor would knocking the house down and building a much bigger house on the total 8,400 square feet be something that I would think that we would find to be what we are normally trying to preserve. So I'm inclined to grant it.
Yeah, from the exceptional practical difficulty for me is, to try to shave the inches off. You're going to destroy the building, destroy. Then the other option would be a financial practical difficulty to get in and lift it and move it. And we've seen before with these surveyors, even if they did lift it and move it, I'm not sure the result if you're going to make it, make it or not. So that's a financial practical difficulty, and I think it is. Again, we're not going down the path of the Planning Commission, but I just think it's the chance to save the house.
But in a bastardized condition. Excuse me.
I hate using that. I hate using that word.
But in this case, though, because we're taking off a big section of the charm, we're putting an ugly parking lot right out in front of the house. It's not going to be the charming house it is today. And they have other options. Perhaps tearing it down and putting 2 new homes might be preferable.
Or a single.
Or a single would be way preferable, but that's
Well,
probably
I don't
not
know.
economical. Probably not us to
But that's not.
decide.
It's not up to us to
But
decide.
I don't think
right?
2 new homes are going to be any worse than this house cut in half.
Only if the Planning Commission were to approve.
Sure,
it, right?
sure, of course.
And 2 new homes would take more trees out. Because with that
That might be
footprint,
true,
with that footprint of the older home on 54, you're going to be able to maintain, hypothetically, again, no promises here, but you're going to be able to maintain trees because they're already kind of encircling. I went and looked, maybe you guys did too. I always go to every place before we have our hearing. But they kind of encircle that footprint and have grown up that way. So there will probably be a change for parking. And another thing that I've thought of is that one of the letters talked about parking on the street and that so many people on Kent Street have to park on the streets. Well, with parking, two parking places in 54, and then there would be some in 52 whenever that happens. You're actually taking some of the traffic. You're not creating more parking on the street.
So there's an existing driveway entrance, I guess, on
On
the
the
left.
left, on the left,
So
yeah.
there you would be adding a new driveway entrance on the right, perhaps 18 feet of
Right,
width.
and they
It doesn't-
probably.
It wouldn't have to be.
And they
18.
probably would change the footprint of the one on the other side whatever is built there, because it's kind of an arc, kind of that leads you directing towards the house. So that isn't what you would want if you have two separate entities. So I'm agreeing with Bill and Barry.
Jan, what your thoughts?
No, I mean, Mark, I walk by that house, as I said, a lot. Without the screen porch, it's still very charming. I love the way the roof line goes and everything. You can see we pay attention to it, especially when there's a sign out front, which there's been for quite a while. Not the Board of Adjustment sign. And I mean, I know why you all put the little parking thing in. Matt mentioned it, and that would have been a condition. There is no, it's your legal right to partition your property if you want. There are many properties in town, including mine, that have 6-foot setbacks on each side because that's what it used to be, and some of them have no setbacks on each side. So, I'm inclined to agree. I just don't. I think taking off the porch, taking off the deck, that's a given. You have to do that. And the few little inches. That's why I asked how many feet were left, because I'm not a math teacher, and I need a little bit more understanding, so that's very helpful to me. And I'm sick about the trees. I don't know what will happen, because I don't think the pictures do justify.
No.
These pine trees are just...
They're huge.
They're huge, and the bark is so cool. Anyway.
Either way, we have no control over that.
We have no control over that, yes. And I don't, it's a good thing you didn't try to call the arborist, because she doesn't work here anymore, so...
Yeah, Mayor.
I don't know it, but I guess the city's going to hire another one. I have no idea.
Oh, Liz.
Matt is shaking his head.
Liz
Okay.
Lingo.
She's gone. Oh, okay,
I
sorry.
thought she was. I
That's
thought
only a
she
couple
was.
more days. Yeah, okay.
All right, may I get a motion?
I'll move to approve the variance as requested. I believe that the applicant has met all 4 of the quick check factors. Do not see that it would be adversely affecting neighboring property for the reasons that we stated earlier, and that there would be exceptional practical difficulty, assuming that the Planning Commission grants the request for a partition, exceptional practical difficulty in meeting the current side setback requirements. So I support the granting of the request.
We get a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
Edie? All right, so we're going to start the vote. Mark, I'll start with you again.
This is a tough one. I wish I had the choice of leaving it exactly the way it is, you know? But I don't, so I will vote in favor of it and hope that that's the right decision.
And your reasons in favor?
As Bill had stated, it's probably, we're really talking about only that very narrow 4-inch strip, which seems certainly de minimis and has that particular strip has no effect on the neighborhood, nor would it have any, and it does keep them from doing what they want to do. So I think they meet the 4 criteria.
Edie? Edie?
Yeah, I think this meets the quick check criteria. The number 1 and 2 are, again, given. And I don't think that the removal of the restriction would, I think that I don't think we're going to seriously affect neighboring properties. As a matter of fact, we're giving the owners the opportunity to subdivide their property if they can meet the Planning Commission's strictures. And number 4, it's a perceived hardship because as Jan said so well, owners have the right to subdivide their properties within reason, and this is, in my mind, within reason. So I'm approving this with fingers like this for the planning commission.
Fingers like this for the trees.
But that, well, it's the same
All
thing,
right,
right?
Jan?
Yes, I support the, I support the variance for all the reasons given by Bill, Mark, and Edie. I don't think I need to state them all over again.
No, you're fine. Bill?
Yeah, I support it for the reasons I stated in granting, in
Okay.
making the motion.
And I too looked at this. Quick check items 1, 2, and 3 for me. I had no problems. Quick check number 4, I do see an exceptional practical difficulty for the homeowners, trying to get that very small amount of space. So with that, it's 5-0. You are approved. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for staying. Pete,
All of you.
Yeah,
all of
the
you.
pizza's
Thank
being
you all
delivered.
for- Thank you all for staying and sharing your
And thank
thoughts.
you so much.
I will send that letter to the Historical Society.
Before we call an adjournment, Mark, did you want to ask us?
I just, this is a good
This is just for
example
the
of what
board.
happens when we start our meetings at 2:30. And I'm wondering if anything's changed that we could perhaps start our meetings earlier, even if on a different date of the week. I know Jan had something on Mondays that was difficult. I'm wondering what other options
No,
do
they're
we
all
have?
shaking.
So they're,
We have room and staff issues to contend with, and it's been historically Mondays. In fact, I was kind of surprised that we were permitted to move the meetings from the evening to the daytime without less
That was
restriction.
yeah, that was like, yeah.
That
We
was-
did move the September one to a Tuesday, just for one.
That was one
Was
time.
Labor Day or
exception.
something.
So Mark, is your question,
Oh, it was
can
Jewish holidays.
can it come to an earlier hour?
Yeah, or even an early hour. It seems that we're running more and
But Jan
more
had
times
something in
this late.
Dover.
There is a meeting in the morning
There's
here.
Parks and Shade
But
Tree in
Jan,
the
you had
morning.
an issue, I think.
I did. I'm doing, if there's no Board of Adjustment meeting, I'm going to Dover for my meetings. And so I was trying to go to Dover and come back here, and that's why I needed to be back here. My meeting in Dover starts at noon, but it's usually finished by 12:30. So, but I'm doing it by Zoom now.
So that's not an issue.
You want to try?
Could we do 1:30? Because I do
Anything
need
a little earlier so that we're not running into